clear picture, is there?
Okay, Charlie, Councillor Stern, you can start.
Thank you very much. Welcome,
You've got no
everybody.
picture. Oh, it's not gonna have- sorry.
Stop talking, please. Welcome, everybody, to the planning meeting tonight. You have the agendas in front of you, and we'll start with item 1, which are the apologies, please.
Thank you, Chairman. We've received apologies from Councillor Roger Glitherow. That's it, thank you.
Thank you. Item 2, the minutes of the last meeting. You have them in front of you, I guess, held on the 24th of June and the 8th of July. Is it your wish that I sign them?
Agree.
Aye.
Chair.
Aye.
Okay, we'll take that as no one against. Then I will sign those at some stage. Item 3 is declarations of interest and informal site visits. So we'll start with declarations of interest first. Do we have any? Peter?
Chairman. Oh, sorry. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The application for the development of a house at College Street. My company has worked for this applicant in the past, some 2 years or so ago.
But you've not had any conversation or negotiations with them yourself?
No. So I'm declaring an other interest, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Robin?
Yes, Chairman, thank you. Same as last time, really. An application 19/01935/4, 28 College Street, Earthinborough. I know John Sidey, the agent. It's
Okay.
another interest.
Anyone else wish to make a declaration of interest?
Yes, Councillor Andy Mercer.
Thank you. Andy?
Thank you, Chair. On application 19/01569 full High Street Rushton, 105 High Street Rushton, I need to declare another interest, and I think we all do, because the drive at the bottom of it, on the western side of it, not only borders the land owned by the district council, it's not clear where the actual boundary line is, and some of the drive may actually go over district council land. Therefore, I need to declare an interest, and I suggest that all of the district councillors should do so.
Could the minutes show that particular item rather than ask everyone to declare an interest? Okay,
Yes.
Thank you, Andy.
Chair, can I just remind you of the need for the members to declare any lobbying?
Yes, okay. Have we done the general declaration of interest? That's finished, is it? Yep. There's one other thing that we've got to just discuss on the Twywell application, is the lobbying. We've probably all had a lobbying letter, and I need you all to think that the decisions that you make tonight were not affected by that lobbying letter, and you have not made a decision yet, and you will make it during the course of the evening, and that lobbying letter won't affect you. Does anyone disagree with that?
Councillor Stern, Jill Mercer here.
Jill.
I appreciate that, but I don't think I've ever had an application at planning where I have not been lobbied. We get these letters, we read them, we take them on board, the same as we do the speakers,
Yes.
and it should not affect us. So if we're going to declare no lobbying on every single item, we're going to have to extend the meeting.
I understand that. On this particular occasion, we ought to do it. So we'll do it tonight, Jill, but we'll work out a better
I have
plan.
not been lobbied, or at least I only just read the application.
Thank you. Peter?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to say that I have not received a lobby letter from this applicant.
That's all right. Barbara?
Yes, I need to advise that I have received a letter from this particular applicant. I've also received letters from Councillor Dorothy Maxwell in respect of 2 applications, the one in High Street, Rushden, and one College Street, Irthlingborough.
Okay, and none of those have altered your opinion or have had any movement on your decision tonight?
No, I've retained an open mind on all applications.
Thank you. Great, thank you. Andy?
Thank you, Chairman. If we have received any such letter, it will still be in quarantine. Everything that comes through the door spends 4 days in quarantine. I have not opened any such letter, and I don't think Councillor Jill Mercer has either.
Okay, fine, that's no problem then. So that's that one clear.
No, it's Councillor Underwood.
Robin? Yes?
Yes. Yeah, I ought to declare lobbying the same as Councillor Barbara Jenny for the application 28 College Street and 105 High Street, Rushden.
Okay. And has that lobbying affected you, or have you ignored it?
No. I had to wear my gloves to get it out of quarantine. So just as a general point, if officers could send it out earlier, we might be able to read what we get without putting gloves on.
Let's not get into that tonight. Fine, so that's the lobbying over with.
I don't think it is, Chairman, actually. I think there's a number of us with our hands up as well. We've all.
I can't see.
No, Councillor Lee Wilkes here. I've received the same lobbying on applications as well. Thanks, Chairman. But again, it won't influence my decision this evening.
Okay, Dudley.
I've had letters, but I have to say every meeting we come to, we get letters. But it doesn't change any of my mind about it. I just come here, listen to what's said.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Chair, yes, if I may.
Yes, Harriet.
Councillor Harriet Pentland here. Again, as with other councillors, I've received a lobbying email in relation to the College Street application, but it hasn't influenced how I'm coming into this application. Thank you.
Fine, thank you. Anyone else?
Chair, also Councillor Mercer, Jill Mercer.
Jill?
Yes, I'm the same with I have actually read the emails, but I have an open mind. But also, if we're going now on to site visits, I did a informal site visit of 105 High Street. Didn't talk to anyone, just had a look round.
Sorry, yeah, we haven't done site visits yet. We're going on to that. So
that's what I've written on my comment. So I assume the officer picked that up.
Any other informal site visits, please? Dudley?
Yes, I went to Twywell, saw the road area.
Okay, Robin?
Yes, I went to 105 High Street and walked down the back where the proposed road's going.
Didn't speak to anyone or?
No.
Right. Andy?
Thank you, Chairman. I've walked down to 105 High Street. I've walked both sides of it, but at no point did I speak to anyone other than another councillor who was at the same site.
Thank you. Jeff?
Just to say that the High Street Twywell, I drove by the site, but I didn't stop to speak to anybody.
Okay, thank you. Barbara?
Well, I was not on a site visit today, but I was in the High Street, and I should declare that I spoke to one of the local business owners.
But that didn't affect your decision tonight?
No, I shall make my decision this evening.
Thank you. Any more informal site visits? Okay, so that's that item covered. And we move on to item 4, which is questions from members. Do we have any? Charlie?
Sorry, I was having problems with my buttons there. No, Chairman, there were no questions received from members. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Then item 5, the Section 106 agreements and delegations. Catherine, are you handling this, Catherine?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. We're requesting extensions of time on application 19/01092/FUL for Rushden Living and an extension is requested until the 31st of August to allow parties to continue to negotiate. And again, for 19/01355/OUT until the 14th of August to allow work to continue to progress on the Section 106.
Right, so that's 3 applications. Can I have someone please to move those? We accept those. Thank you. Second it. Those in favour? Anyone against? Okay.
And then do you want me to refer to the delegations now?
Please.
Okay, so just to give you an update on 19/01092/FUL for Rushden Living, condition 22 has now been removed following advice from the Senior Environmental Protection Officer. Application 19/01872/FUL Benfield Road in Glapthorne. Planning permission was issued on the 16th of July. 20/00148/FUL Manor Farm in Glapthorne. Permission was issued on the 17th of July. And 19/01238/FUL Addington Road in Woodford. Permission was refused on the 17th of July.
Any comments, members? Therefore, on your behalf, we accept that report, okay?
Yep.
Great.
Thank you. Now we move on to the applications tonight. The same ones that we've seen before. And at this stage, may I say to both members and particularly to speakers and residents, we're sorry to mess you around last time and keep you waiting for so long and not be able to get round to these at the last meeting. However, we should hopefully get through them tonight. So we'll start with the first one, which is High Street Rushden. And can we have, please, the officer introduction? No? Which officer is handling this application?
It's Patrick
Sorry,
Reed.
Phil. Did my line cut out there? Were you talking to me?
Is it your application?
Is this 105 High Street?
Yes.
Yes, then it is.
Talking to you. So can you introduce it, please?
I will. Bear with me one moment. I'm having some IT problems. My presentation's disappeared. So excuse me, my the system's gone down. I'm trying to get it back. Bear with me one moment. This is looking more promising.
Paddy, if you can't get it to load, I've got a copy open if you want me to share my screen.
I'm hopefully nearly there. Excuse me. Right, okay, hopefully you now have it in front of you.
Okay, crack on.
Okay. Okay. This is the application reference 19/01569/FUL. It's an application relating to a site at 105 High Street in Rushden. It's an application to change the use of the ground floor from a public house to a restaurant and bar at ground floor, as well as providing flats above at first floor and second floor level, a total of 8 units. As set out in the report, I believe these pages may now actually refer to the previous committee reports. Those numbers might be wrong, but the recommendation for its approval. In terms of the actual site itself, This is the application site outlined in red on the western side of the high street. So what we have here is the pub or former pub. It suffered fire damage in 2018 and has stood since, unoccupied and fire damaged ever since. It's surrounded by scaffolding. It's lost its roof, and evidently there's quite significant damage occurred from the fire. To the rear is a yard, and to the around here is a sort of partly overgrown track. Just as an aerial image, and we have the application site here, just putting it in the context of the high street, running in a general north-south orientation. And as we'll move on to here, this is West Street, where it is proposed to join in terms of the access arrangements. This is a more zoomed in visual of the site. So we have obviously the roof of 105 High Street here, and you can see this area here is the existing rear of the site. You can see cars parked in the rear here, as well as some of it is overgrown. And just here where my cursor is 103, and there's an access in between the two buildings, which has a gate at the front, which exists and operated while the site was a pub and operating. One thing I've included here with the agreement of the applicant is extracts of the title plan. I'm conscious members have been concerned about the land ownership of the site, so the applicant has provided the title plans of the site. So it's divided into two. That's why we have two plans here, one showing their ownership of the proposed rear access and the rest of the site. In terms of the site itself and how it appears, both of these are taken from the high street. Clearly it's aesthetically not a good site at the moment, with the scaffolding not being of any functional use and clearly in need of works. But it also gives you a sense of the buildings surrounding. We are in the Rushden Conservation Area here, and there's a mixture of sort of architectural styles and ages of buildings. So we've got the buildings to the right as we're looking in 103 to the left, and it gives you a general sense of what's around. This is a view further backwards, again facing towards the application site, still in scaffolding. This is a junction with Queen Street, leading on to the high street. It's a one-way high street, heading away from us. Here we have the existing access, which is also proposed to be reused behind this gate, and a couple of more photos of the appearance of the building as it currently stands, and we can see part of the surrounding buildings nearby. A further image of the building at the front. What we have here is an image of the part of the site to the rear where it is proposed to exit. So we have the back of the adjacent properties on our right hand side. Clearly it's sort of partly overgrown on the side where the boundary is, and it's sort of slightly messy and unkempt at the back. And you can see there is a car parked at the sort of where the track meets West Street. These are a couple of other photos of the nearby surroundings. So this is from in the top and left hand side from the alternate view. So this is facing down towards where the proposed car park is. And in the bottom right we have West Street itself, facing up West Street, from near where the cars would exit up towards the high street. This is the junction between West Street and the High Street, included to sort of give an indication of the junction here, and also it gives a general indication of the nature of the architecture in the High Street. Another photo of the frontage. In terms of the proposal itself and the proposed works, what we have here is the proposed site plan. So we have the building is being converted, as well as the works taking place to reinstall a roof and residential accommodation above. We have the proposed entry here. The car park we can see is proposed solely for the use of residents and staff of the restaurant and bar. No public customer access to that car park will be proposed. It's not clear on this plan, it's perhaps a bit too blurry, but what we have there is the ground floor plan, so it's a sort of open plan bar restaurant shown. And in terms of the way the access will work, obviously it's a one-way proposal. Vehicles come off the high street and park, and then exit through the route shown onto West Street and back up again. In terms of the appearance proposed, this is the proposed front elevation. It's not dissimilar to how the building appeared prior to the fire. It's kept much of the features as it previously had. The Velux windows are an addition which would serve the residential accommodation above. In scale, it's similar to that previously existed, and the window layout is much the same as it previously was. This is proposed rear elevation. What we have here is worth being aware there is a lower ground floor level. So where my cursor is, where those four rectangular windows are, they would serve the kitchen. So although they're it's not really a basement, because of course they have windows facing out there. Then the restaurant above, and then 2 floors of residential accommodation above. The 2 proposed side elevations, I won't spend too long with those. Obviously these are largely hidden from public view or not particularly prominent due to the nature of the closeness of buildings surrounding. We have the section drawing here giving an idea of the change in levels across the site. So we have the kitchen at lower ground floor, basement level, with the restaurant above, and the residential accommodation above that. In terms of floor plans, we have this is the loft floor plans to the highest level. At each level we have 4 flats proposed, each of a relatively similar size. The mix between the 8 comprises 4 1-bedroom, 4 1-bedroom, 2 studio and 2 2-bedroom flats. This is the first floor plan, as well as I've included a larger version of the ground floor plan just to make it clearer to members, as well as the kitchen at ground floor level. In terms of the considerations of the application, it's worth drawing members' attention to the update sheet. As you'll see, there's a number of updates on this application, partly what came in prior to the previous committee where the application wasn't heard. There's a couple more on this application as well. As you'll see in the report and the updates, the application has been called in by members at the time of it going to or being called into committee. There's only been the 4 objections at that point. There's a couple more come in over the past recent days. They're included on the update sheet. The main considerations, of course, here are in terms of design and visual impact in the conservation area. So we've had the council's senior conservation officer consider the application in terms of design, and as you'll see, it's deemed to be acceptable in terms of design. In terms of the use, obviously at ground floor level, we're in the town centre, whereby the policies, both neighbourhood plan and the core strategy, both support town centre uses and require them at ground floor level. This, of course, being a restaurant and bar, meets that requirement. The neighbour plan also supports the use of first and upper floor stories for residential, so those in terms of principle are fully deemed to be fully compliant and supported by the development plan. In terms of access, as you see, that it's a one-way access proposed, and we've had comments from the highways officer. Obviously, we're not talking about starting a site from scratch here. It's constrained by the nature of the site. The highways officer comments that the one-way access is an improvement to the existing. The existing is unrestricted. There are no planning constraints on that. So the pub that existed for many years had an uncontrolled in-out access, and this, of course, proposes a one-way as well as increasing number of parking spaces. We've also, I'll draw your attention to comments on the update sheet from the Northamptonshire County Police in terms of their consideration of the exit as requested by members. Their comments are included. It seemed to be an improvement because, of course, increased use of the rear area, which is currently sort of overgrown and quite hidden. Increased activity actually is an improvement to security and safety. And one thing they have suggested is the lighting to the parking area and the exit would actually improve that as well. So on the update sheet, an additional condition is recommended to include a condition requiring details of lighting. Otherwise, the recommendation is as set out in the officer report and the update sheet. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Patrick. Right. Now we move on to the speakers. And I remind speakers they have 3 minutes only, not a second more, a second less. And the first one tonight is Paul Harley, who is an objector. Are you there, Mr. Harley?
I'm speaking on behalf of High Street premises affected by this application. We are not here to object fully to this application, just on a few logistics regarding some details that pose a potential problem regarding the development of this site. The problem we are here to discuss is the exit strategy for this application. As you will see on the proposed plans, the exit will be a new road between the rear of our properties and a public car park. The proposal will see cars exiting the development, driving down a steep slope between and around trees, alongside a retaining wall to a public car park, which is approximately 12-foot drop in some places, where the exiting vehicle will be meeting West Street. The land that this proposed exit road is upon is not owned and never has been owned by this current or any previous owners of this site, nor anyone else, as which it appears on Housewife's Choice title deeds as a right of way dated far back as 1927, and no deed of release has been issued. The road that this development is exiting upon is a private road, and again not owned by the landowner, by the land this development is on. All our cars have permission from West Street's landowner, which again is not the applicant, to park on this unadopted dead-end road. So you need to consider if this is classed as either right of way or right of access. The right of way is the point where you step on and off your own land, and a right of access, which is a right to go on someone else's land to access specific parts of your own property only, which are inaccessible from anywhere on your own land. They do not own West Street, so they do not have right of access. All properties along this one-way exit have their fire exits, including the entrance to Serves Day Centre for the elderly and vulnerable adults. All exist onto this so-called one-way exit, so it would be impossible to have a one-way system in place as vehicles are up and down this right-of-way currently. Thank you.
Was that Mr. Harley?
It was, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Right. And the second speaker, please, It's Councillor David Coleman, who's speaking on behalf of Rushden Town Council.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Good. Good evening. Councillor David Coleman, representing Rushden Town Council. Firstly, many thanks for giving me an opportunity to speak and make comment on the planning application under review here for the development of the fauna, feathers, public health, another lost asset on our struggling high street. Following review of the proposals during our town's planning consultative meeting on the 28th of November last year, the unanimous decision reached by members was that we should strongly object to these proposals, and this remains our position. Our core objection submitted to ENC, whilst reviewing planning issues, was our serious concerns regarding access and egress from the site, in particular the proposed use of West Street, an unmade private road. Although case officers have reported that the applicant has indicated ownership of the road, we remain unconvinced that this would remain a valid option. We still feel access and exiting the site from the current High Street entrance should be reviewed in isolation. Our High Street is a problem, not least because of the increasing levels of traffic flow and uncontrolled illegal parking. Issues are particularly noted around the High Street access to the site to the bottom of Queen Street, often creating a bottleneck. The additional traffic created by a more concentrated use of this site, along with delivery vehicles to the proposed restaurant, waste collection, etc., will see further deterioration of the situation. In the background to our discussions was a continuing unease at the flooding of our central area with a surfeit of flats, with more seemingly uncontrolled development in the pipeline. Our site under review should be considered key to any strategy for the reinvigoration of our long neglected High Street. Surely some consideration should and could be given to a better long-term use for the site. Although we are supportive of bringing life into our town centres, this should be controlled. We generally view use of upper floors above shops in our town centre as residential use as beneficial if planned and of a sustainable scale. The proposals put forward here appear to be excessive, not being just a conversion project, but development on a considerably increased scale with no amenity or benefit, which must only add to our high street problems. We are fast losing an opportunity to develop a much needed strategy for the future of our town centre with an overhaul long overdue. Cars rule, and with pressures increasing on our car parks as flats take over, our under pressure retailers are suffering. That concludes my little talk. Many thanks for listening, much appreciated, and over to you.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you. Thank you.
And the third speaker on this application is Councillor Dorothy Maxwell. Dorothy?
Councillor Maxwell, if you press, oh, you've got it.
Hello? Hello?
Yes, come on, let's have you.
Oh, sorry, yeah, hold on, sorry, I have to move between two rooms. Right. Good evening, Chair, Vice Chair, Councillors, officers, members of the public. I'm Dorothy Maxwell. I'm objecting to this application on behalf of the residents for the 8 self-contained flats on top of this proposed bar restaurant. With the extension to the rear of the property, it is totally unacceptable due to Northamptonshire Highways comments, the size of the flats and the overdevelopment and its cramped form of living space and parking. At Prime Minister's question time yesterday, it was stated by the Housing Minister that studio flats were unacceptable space to live and grow, and therefore we should not be allowing this to happen. With the extension of the rear of the property, the sizes of 6, 7 and 8 studio flats does not provide acceptable living conditions. The question is, why do we need all these flats in the high street? And just where are these residents supposed to park? 8 flats within 16 vehicles or 24 vehicles. People using the high street would be prohibited from parking to collect large items from West End stores or drop off electrical appliances to the electrical shop. If we're going to regenerate the high street, the way forward is not to develop all these flats, which would change the street scene. Before the pub was burnt down, there were 2 flats for the pub's owner, and now people can sit outside due to the new COVID law passed on Monday the 20th July, which allows people to sit outside, drink and eat food. This would leave no parking spaces for anyone in the rear of this property. However, why should residents be subject to noise? Northamptonshire highways have serious concerns over parking and the set in the rear of the pub, with offloading beer barrels, etc. You would not be able to turn around and access the rear. The rear of the building has little space, and access from the main road is clearly a concern for highways in their report. The building next door belongs to ENC, and this is not going to change until 2021. When the officers and councillors looked at this site visually before a planning meeting, they would not have seen the true impact of the access to the rear and parking, which the officers from Northamptonshire Highways would have seen, like I have, as I visited before lockdown. The 3 car parking spaces intended for shoppers and not for permanent residents living nearby.
That's 3 minutes.
Thank you. Sorry, Councillor Maxwell, you've had your 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thanks for listening. Bye.
Bye. And the next speaker, please, is Councillor Richard Lewis, who is the ward member. Richard?
All right. Can you hear me okay, Chair?
And indeed.
Thank you very much. Good evening. Many thanks for the opportunity to say a few words against this High Street planning application. I'm Councillor Richard Lewis. I've been a ward councillor for this area of Rushden for some 13 years. I've also lived within 1.5 miles of Rushden Town Centre for over 78 years now. I've seen the heydays of the High Street and its surrounding area when there used to be a multitude of shops and commercial premises. Of course, also lived through the slow but extensive demise of the same area. More recently, last year at ENC, I was appointed to the Planning Management Committee, which has been an interesting experience. Really apparent to me now that the Rushden High Street area has never really had a specific planning policy. Maybe originally the area was too successful or too big, or who knows. The net result is that within the Rushden High Street area, we now have over almost 1,000 flats, plus HMOs, which is near 70% of all the properties. Not the balance of properties are hoped for in the neighbourhood plan. Take a ride around the streets of the High Street area and you've virtually got a continuum of flats. Not a green space to be seen, and of course building more flats reduces any green areas since more parking is needed. Look at our other ENC towns and Brackley, Daventry and Towcester and see if you can find such an uninspiring, flat-dominated and no green space environment as has been created in Rushden. This application is bang in the middle of the High Street and sets a precedent for High Street development. Yes, the neighbourhood plan accepts that ultimately properties may only be suitable for partial or full conversion into flats. However, this application is not just for conversion to flats, it already has some, but actually increasing the number of flats by a factor of 4 by doubling the floor space of the property. And the existing garden space is reduced to a tarmac car park, except for 2 trees. This has already happened at the Victoria Hotel further down the street, and there are 2 applications in the pipeline for similar types of applications, whereby a major extension for more flats is built with no amenity space. Car parking does not equate to green space, let alone amenity space. If approved, however, returning to this application, if it is approved, then subsequently, without doubt, the others in the area that I've mentioned will inevitably follow on due to the piecemeal assessment basis. Then the real countdown for the High Street proper has begun. In a few years' time, the High Street area will become the ultimate totally inert urban lump. There will be no gardens, no community areas and very few amenities, just flats. What a very sad legacy for 46 years of ENC planning for Rushden. Please use your powers to refuse this application and thus make a decision which can have a long-lasting positive effect in this area of Rushden. Thank you very much.
Councillor, thank you very much. That's quite clear. And the last speaker on this topic is Mr. Chris Feasey, and he is a transport consultant on behalf of the applicant. Are you there, Chris?
Hello.
Yep.
Yes, I've just unmuted myself.
Painful.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you, committee. I should explain. I'm the transport and traffic consultant for the applicant, but despite that, I have a pretty good knowledge of the scheme as a whole. But I was asked to speak because it was anticipated the main point of concern and objection would be on access, traffic, parking matters. And I've heard what the objectives have to say. I have to say, overall, I think this is exactly the sort of development that Rushden High needs to bring it back more to life than its evidence has been for quite some time. I have to say I was quite shocked when I visited the High Street, not knowing it before, I think how lacking in activity it was. I mean, there are plenty of places worse, but it's certainly a core town centre that needs some regeneration in the form of this sort of development. Running through the point of concern, so the on-site parking provision is in fact perfectly adequate for any likely needs for residents and restaurant staff. My understanding is that the County Council, Highway Authority, is mostly satisfied now. In the last discussion, correspondence with the application in all transport aspects. The access arrangements are perfectly safe and practical, and a great improvement on the arrangements for access with the previous pub developments. As regards the question of ownership or occupational right of way of the proposed roadway, land combined proposed roadway at the back, West Street. 2 points. Firstly, strictly that is not an issue that should affect the termination of this planning application. It's not a planning matter, I'm advised. As regards to the allegation by the Town Council that West Street is an unmade road, it is clearly anything but. It's a substantially constructed, fully paved and serviced highway, and evidently has been since Victorian times. In appearance, it looks and functions as a public highway, even though technically it's not. It's quite surprised this is not an adopted road. It's certainly perfectly usable, and our team's exhaustive inquiries indicated that the developer would have full rights of access over West Street, as well as over the passageway at the back. We're aware that certain other neighbouring properties backing onto the corridor at the back have access rights there, and those will be fully respected and accommodated, or whatever they require. And again, it's perfectly adequate even for emergency fire access and such like. A clear arrangement that can be made there if needed. Right.
3 minutes. Thank you, Charlie. Sorry, that's the end of your time, sir. Thank you for your contribution.
Thank you.
So that's the speakers for tonight. I now wish to move to the ward member. Councillor Jenny, it's yours, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Can you give your input, please?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Well, this pub has been known as the Feathers. It's been on this site since 1881. It's within the conservation area, and whilst not listed, it is recognised as a building of heritage value. A fire in May 2018 extensively gutted the building. I welcome a former business being brought back into use and the employment opportunities attached to that, particularly one that contributes to the nighttime economy of the town. A quality restaurant would be a good addition to the town. I also welcome the retention of the attractive facade, as this adds positively to the street scene. Whilst living accommodation over ground floor businesses is accepted, the difficulty with this application is balancing the need to bring back into use a heritage building with an over-intensification of the flats above. The original pub had only one flat on the first floor. This application proposes an extension of the building to include a second floor and a total provision of 8 flats. I regard this as an over-intensification. Access to the flats is via the front of the building, via the oak door, with all the flats feeding off one central staircase. The fire service have now commented and they have no concern regarding one central staircase serving all the flats, even with a kitchen on the lower ground floor. However, this is still a concern. I would remind members the pub was extensively damaged in May 2018 by a fire. A separate entrance will be created in the frontage for the restaurant. With regard to waste management, Waste has now also commented, and this is on the update sheet. They raised concerns that all domestic waste would need to be brought out through the front door onto the high street and carried round to the back of the building. It would then need to be brought back to the high street for collection. There was also the need to separate commercial waste from the kitchen from domestic waste. Waste Management have commented that no provision has been made for waste bins, and this is now resulting in the loss of a parking space in order to provide for up to 4 euro size bins for bin storage. The question is also, and this is asked by Waste Management, how would the commercial waste be kept separate? Waste Management have commented it would not be practicable for the waste for 8 flats to be presented on the high street. Even if the waste lorry was able to access the rear of the site to collect waste, the lorry would need to exit via the track onto West Street and would miss part of its round. Commercial Health have commented, and their comments relate to the siting of the kitchen in the basement, which poses issues around adequate ventilation. A ventilation survey should be undertaken to identify what is required to ensure that there is not a build-up of cooking odours or potentially harmful gases such as carbon dioxide and associated storage. The basement area cannot be used without adequate ventilation, and that comment is also supported by the Environmental Protection Officer. Sufficient airflow in the kitchen and associated storage areas to maintain the temperature at a suitable level for staff. And there needs to be safe and suitable method for taking deliveries from the basement or into the basement and back up again. Originally, Environmental Protection commented that the dumbwaiter could not be used for the taking in of deliveries, i.e. raw food, and then for the removal of waste when it is used to transport cooked food. Those points need to be taken into account. Parking provision is for 17 spaces, less the one that is now taken out for storage of waste, and that included 2 disabled bays. No indication is given of the number of staff to be employed, so there's no way of knowing how many parking spaces would be taken by staff. and no provision is made for customer parking. There is a car park close by, but it's more than likely that parking would be on the street, which is already congested with parked cars. You will have seen from the officers' photographs that there are vehicles parked on both sides of the road. There is a parking bay opposite, but the cars will take up both sides of the road, and for convenience they will park outside. There are some bollards that the road narrows particularly at this point, and recently bollards were taken out by a delivery lorry trying to make its way through between the parked cars. Highways Association have stipulated on the 5th of November last year that visibility displays required for vehicles exiting the site onto the high street cannot be achieved. This view was repeated on the 17th and the 20th of May this year. They reiterated that there is no pedestrian or vehicle visibility displays onto the high street. Exiting the site can only be from the rear of the site via the track leading onto West Street. This track has not been in use for some time from the Feathers through to West Street, and has actually been closed off by neighbouring businesses for some years. The track runs parallel to the adjoining Wilko site and sits atop a very high retaining wall. We've just heard points that is 12 foot high. The applicant has apparently provided confirmation that the land is in his ownership, but we have heard from a neighbouring business owner that this is disputed. Members should particularly note that there is significant level change from the front of the site at the High Street to the rear of the site. That's not taking into account the retaining wall. At the point vehicles would leave the parking area, there is a level change of about 1.5 meters. Vehicles would need to negotiate this fall in levels and simultaneously turn right to exit along the track. As the retaining wall is to prevent land slippage into Wilko's car park, this wall is flush with the surface of the track. Adequate fencing would be needed to prevent vehicles going over the retaining wall and dropping the distance down into the car park. The load on the retaining wall from vehicles turning at this point is, I understand, not a planning consideration. However, trees will have to be removed, presumably a surface would be laid and suitable safety fencing installed. All this without the disturbance to the retaining wall. The track is particularly narrow at the rear of 111A and is very close to the top of the retaining wall. I have doubts that there will be no impact on the wall. I understand that from the adjoining businesses that part of the track is accessed from West Street. So there would be a conflict from vehicles exiting from the Feathers site. But I'm pleased that the police have confirmed that suitable lighting would have to be provided for safety purposes. If it is safe for vehicles to exit directly onto the high street, if it's unsafe for vehicles to exit directly onto the high street, I would like to know what measures could be put in place to prevent this happening, because I feel that rather than use this track and the issues associated with that, then vehicles will just come out onto the high street. It's well documented that there is an over provision of flats in Rushden. We've already heard there are over 1,000 in the town centre. This results in a lower economic level for the town. The addition of flats is not welcome. I would like, if it's possible, for a condition to be put on this site that no flats can be occupied until the business is established. We've seen in other instances, and I feel there could be a risk that the business element which is offered with this application may not come forward if an operator cannot be found, and a later application is then received to convert the whole building into flats. I will pass over to other members for their comments. I would appreciate their views at this stage. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Barbara. We'll do a round robin now of every member. If you wish to speak, please do so. If you don't, please move on and say, I don't wish to speak, and we'll move on to the next one quickly. So I'll read out the names. Can you answer whether you want to speak or not as your name is called? Councillor Hughes.
So I'd like to say something. Shall I say it now?
Yes, please.
Right, I think it's a shame that this application is what it is, because the concept of bringing that building back into use, as the ward councillor has quite correctly said, is great. The concept of even providing accommodation above these buildings is also great, but the problem is this accommodation is too crowded, and of course it's crowded, of course it requires more parking and so on, and I do feel that the applicant needs to perhaps rethink the access issues, the waste disposal issues, and I'm very surprised that 8 flats can all be accessed through one set of staircase above a restaurant, because obviously if there's a fire in the restaurant, how do they get out? I would have thought there had to be some other fire exit at the back. So I think that should be re-looked at. Maybe it wasn't considered appropriately. But I think it's a great idea, but it's not going to happen there.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Jackson.
Not present.
Not present. Councillor Jenny, you've already spoken. Councillor Jones.
I have no comment to make.
Thank you. Councillor Andy Mercer.
Yes, I would like to speak, Chairman. There's a couple of points about this that concern me. I know it's not a material consideration, but I'd like it put on record that I am very concerned about the flats all being accessed off a central staircase. In Grenfell Tower, the fire service assured everybody that that was safe, and 78 people died. There is still an investigation, an inquiry going on right now, and I suspect the London Fire Brigade will be severely criticised over that, and new policies will be issued. I feel that if you were to build something like this on the continent or the United States, they would laugh at you if you considered doing it without a fire escape included in the design. The second point is the transport agent's comment of perfectly safe. That is a very, very strong term to use. If someone comes out of the pub a little bit the worse for drink and drives down the slope towards the drive that goes out, if they get it wrong, there is about a 12-foot drop to the bottom of the wall. That requires a significantly strong crash barrier capable of stopping a car at about 20 miles an hour, maybe even 25. Similarly, we need a fence along there that is high enough to stop someone who's drunk a little bit too much from tripping over the crash barrier and falling headfirst over the wall. Without both of those, I find it very hard to see how you could describe this as perfectly safe. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Andy. Do we have any other wishes? Well, we're going round, aren't we? So that's Andy. So, Councillor Jill Mercer.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm glad Councillor Mercer mentioned that safety issue with the very steep drop. I would like to see a condition put on if this is passed to make sure that the barrier and a fence are installed, because otherwise I feel it's a health and safety issue. I'm concerned about the amount of parking here. I believe that the County Council have suggested that there should be 33 spaces. I think it's plus 10 for the flats. Saw somewhere in one of the reports the officers mentioned 43, so I think it's 33 plus 10. We've also heard that because of the waste, that one would be reduced, and they're only providing 17. I'm very concerned that that's a small number. I'm also rather concerned about the amenity space for the flats, and maybe one of the officers can come back and assure me on that. The trees along this path, presumably quite a bit of this will have to be removed. Having gone along that path, it is blocked off. It's we didn't actually see the bit that we really needed to see, because we saw the clear bit, and if you turned round at that point you'd see that it was blocked. Now I'm sure that can be opened up, that's not a problem, but one of the things that I was concerned of is one of the speakers mentioned about the access for the serve, and that people use that site to go into. Now, it's all very well to say you've got a one-way system and people have got to come out there, but there's nothing to stop anyone else parking there or coming into it and meeting the car coming the other way. I'm not quite sure how the officers think that that's going to work. Now, when I went on the site visit, there were 2 cars parked there. So, and I think in the photo there was a car parked there. So I'm really concerned about that. So there are some concerns. I think 8 flats, I'm not got a problem with having flats there per se, because I think it can bring life back to the town. I think 8 flats is possibly too many, and which then produces the problem of the parking, etc. But I'm really concerned with some of these other issues to do with the safety and the one-way system and how you would get out at that point.
Thank you, Jill. Councillor Harriet Pentland.
Thank you, Chair. I agree with the comments made by my fellow councillors, particularly those raised by Councillor Mercer regarding fires and concerns. Therefore, the one question I have is, do we know what caused the fire in 2018? Thank you.
We'll get to an officer at the end when you've all spoken. Councillor Jeff Shatlock.
Nothing to add, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Alex Smith.
Thanks, Chair. I think my only concern is the number of apartments in the block. I think 8 is too many for a very constrained space. I think the restaurant is a good idea. I think the development is good, but the number of flats I'd be concerned about. No further comments. Thanks, Chair.
Peter Thomas, Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I really would like to see this building brought back into use. It's a real eyesore at the moment, but in saying that, I think that 8 flats is too many, and we do need to sort out the access and egress to the site. That's all I have to say, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Councillor Underwood.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I would like to speak. I've been reading the design and access statement, and there appears to be that there was one query at the beginning and a pre-application advice was given. Now, to be honest, I'm in 2 minds about this one, because it looks an eyesore at the moment. Obviously, when it was just a public house, it wasn't viable. And the idea of the 8 flats presumably is to make the whole application viable, because otherwise you're basically back to a pub with a restaurant. I do have concerns about the number of 8 flats, but they all meet with the regulations. And what else was I going to say? As I say, I'm in two minds about this one. We need something there to improve the high street. It's a question of what we can put there. And if this is turned down, then what options do we have after that? Do we just take the feathers down and put some houses there? Or what do we do? So when it comes to the vote, I am undecided which way I will vote. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor, I hope your vote will be based upon the application that we have in front of us, and that's all we're looking at, not what may or may not happen in the future.
I understand that, Chairman.
So, Councillor Peter Watson, is he in? No, Peter? I guess he's not there.
He's not present.
Councillor Lee Wilkes.
Thank you, Chairman. I share the concerns that my fellow members have already raised, so I won't go over those. I have one question, and that is, looking at the exit from this site, if this site is a one-way track, looking at the exit, the road at the back of these buildings looks on the face of it to be unsuitable. It's narrow, but it looks particularly narrow at the rear of, I think it's 110A. It is the building that is the deepest. And I wonder if officers could clarify how wide is the road at the back of that building. I'm thinking really about large vehicles trying to get down it, or specifically emergency services. That's it.
Thank you, Councillor Wilkes. That's everyone's had the chance to speak first time round. I'm now going to go to Patrick Reed, the officer who introduced the plan, and hopefully he's got notes of your questions and has some answers for us.
I do, thank you, Chair. Right, there's a number of points raised by members, so bear with me, I'll try and answer them. Okay, I'll go one by one, as it were. Central staircase and fire concern. This was brought up by a couple of members. The main point here is to remember we're determining a planning application. Matters of fire safety are not really considered a material planning consideration. We've also had comments from the fire officer, and it's not uncommon for, it's not for us, it's not for the lay person to judge whether or not a central stairway is acceptable in terms of fire safety. We've had comments from the hot fire brigade anyway. We also have to remember that any developers have to go through building regulations, and they have various other legislation there to meet. So it's simply not a material planning consideration, and it's deemed to be acceptable in that respect. Waste management, Councillor Barbara Jenny mentioned this. What we have is we have had an amended plan indicating where both residential and commercial waste would be stored in the rear. There's a condition on your sheets, condition 7, where we're requiring details of the storage and collection to be agreed. We've had indication of where that would be, but that it came too late through the process, so we can require that through by condition. Where the confusion appeared to be was that they would all be together, and that isn't the case. There would be a separate unit for the waste collection and separate for residential. Also, there would be no large units going into the car park. That's always been made clear throughout the report. Any collection would be off the high street. In terms of commercial health and the ventilation, etc., it's worth bringing members' attention to the fact that the kitchen has 4 windows, and also condition 4 requires a ventilation scheme as well. Again, we're straying here into partly matters outside of planning, but that is dealt with both by windows and the ventilation scheme. So whilst the average person might wonder, well, what about ventilation? It's a restaurant. That's already addressed, and in planning terms and assessing against planning policy is acceptable in those respects. In terms of, there was one perhaps significant point that has been mentioned by a couple of members, and And you have to think really carefully about this, because you've mentioned the number of flats, or an over-intensification of flats. That in itself doesn't really add up. That doesn't make sense. If you're talking too many flats because it's going too high, therefore it has a visual impact, or too many flats because it has too many parking spaces cannot be accommodated, both of those matters, it's already deemed to be acceptable both visually and both in terms of parking as well. If members are thinking that simply there is too many flats, despite going against the neighbour plan which supports this and the core strategy, if that were to be appealed, then you're looking at a straight costs against the council. They need to think really carefully about that. Also, there was comments in terms of the economic level of occupants of flats. I'd urge members to be very cautious when they suggest things like this, because there's no basis to suggest that anyone living in a flat has any less of an economic benefit to the high street or community than anyone else. There's a real concern that that would stray into discriminatory matters. These are dwellings and should be considered so, and the size of the units are acceptable, and it's all set out in the report in terms of meeting all the requirements there. There was a couple of other points in terms of mentioning Grenfell, etc., and also the cause of the fire. The cause of the fire for the pub is understood to be arson. It wasn't due to it being a unit above a pub. Again, as previously, fire is not a really something that we should be considering here. The barrier at the back. Now, it's been mentioned that people may leave the pub having had a few drinks, then drive. Of course, that could happen anywhere. We wouldn't suggest refusing an application based on drink driving. The application is shown to have a steel barrier at the back beside the wall. It's going to be a solid barrier. There isn't any indication that that would be dangerous at all. There was a mention on a number of spaces from the highways officer in terms of parking. That was initially, but of course that's based on standards, as if you have a restaurant and bar and then residential units above, starting afresh. Obviously we have a site constrained by the existing space available, and we have a pub that's already been existing on the same floor space that has had very little parking other than the parking to the rear. So, as well as the one-way system. So it's not, you can't simply say the lack of parking spaces. We have to materially consider what's there. We have an unrestricted in-out system. There was, in terms of how wide is the access to the rear in terms of Councillor Wilkes, I don't have a figure in front of me, but it's worth being aware that emergency services wouldn't access that rear track. They would access from the high street, or well, probably not West Street, but from the high street. So no larger vehicles would be going down. And to conclude, my main point would be that this is a planning balance. Obviously, we are looking at, as set out in the report, with significant benefits, economic and social, brought by bringing a building that is an eyesore and functioning economically and socially not at all to the community. Any consideration of other matters have to be weighed up in the planning balance. So members should take that approach when considering all these matters and consider the benefits. We have the provision of accommodation, provision of a town centre use, bringing a building in a conservation area back into an aesthetically pleasing form, against any perceived drawbacks, such as the access arrangement, which, yes, not ideal, but in this case is considered acceptable. So that's the point I'd like to make, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Did you get asked a question about the width of that actual? Did Councillor Wilkes ask you that? The width of the actual road?
He did, but I don't have a width available to me right now.
No, we had this before and you didn't, because we didn't know how far the weeds are going to be taken back on the outside of the drive, do we? Okay. I have 4 people wishing to have a second question session, which I'll go through first before we go to Barbara for a proposal. The first is Councillor Mercer. Andy Mercer.
Thank you, Chair. I've got 2 questions. One of them is going to be quite unusual and is addressed to the solicitor. I'll list the 2 questions and they can answer one after the other. The first one is
we don't
that
have a solicitor here with us tonight, do we?
He has arrived. He is here now.
Okay, thanks.
Right, there is a concept called the common law duty of care, which means that everyone, including public bodies, have to take reasonable care of that they don't cause harm or allow harm to occur to members of the public as a result of their actions. Now, my question is this: is the first question, does that apply to planning committees when they're granting planning consents? That's the first question. I've never heard it asked before, and it's an unusual situation we have here. And the second question is, can we have an actual description of the fence at the edge of the drive along the bottom of the property, because that is supposed to both be sufficient to stop a driver who's driven down the slope and probably doing about 15-20 mile an hour, and at the same time sufficient to stop twits walking over the edge. So could we have an actual description of what is the planned fence? And secondly, can the solicitor tell us whether we have a duty of care as a planning committee? Thank you, Chair.
Let's take Patrick Reed's question first about the barrier. What's it made of, Patrick?
I expect it to be metal. The description on the site plan says safety barrier, so I'm fully expecting it to be a steel form barrier that would be able to take the force of anything accidentally slightly going across, but it's, you know, I can't envision it causing any problems.
Thank you, Patrick. And is the solicitor there? Sorry, I don't know your name. Stephen James.
Hello, Chair.
Hi there.
Hello,
Welcome.
thank you, Chair. Hello, members, officers.
Sorry, Stephen, did you hear the question that Councillor Murphy?
I did hear the question. It's, as the member who asked it will appreciate, it's a rather obscure question in itself. However, local authorities have to act reasonably. One of the statutory functions of a local authority is the planning committee and planning decisions. Therefore, officers have, for the sake of argument, not specific to this report, but officers put forward reports with recommendations based on planning policy, and members are then free to debate that openly and honestly between them, as is in the debate that we've had this evening, and make whatever decision they care to make. But all members have received training, and all members are aware of certain obligations that rest upon their shoulders at planning committee, for example, declaring interests and so on and so on. So the reason I say this is a fairly obscure question is because you would actually have to have somebody challenging a planning decision based on whether or not it was a failure of duty of care. Now, my belief is, and you'll bear with me that I'm not a High Court judge, but my belief would be that such an application would be very, very difficult to prove where a committee had made an honest, detailed decision. You will already be aware, members, that when an aggrieved applicant or an aggrieved objector disagrees with a decision, then he can apply to take the decision of the council's planning committee to judicial review. And one of the grounds for doing so and to actually win a judicial review would be to say the decision made is so perverse that no reasonable committee would make that decision. Now, I think the problem with regards to the application that we've been talking about this evening is I've heard repeated concerns from members about this rear access way. it was raised much earlier in the evening about whether or not one of the objectors, I believe, raised whether or not the developer actually owned the access way or whether they had a right to use it. Those are not material or relevant to this planning application. Were we to, for the sake of argument, grant permission and the developer didn't have those rights or those abilities to use that rear access way, then they would never be able to implement the position. So I appreciate it's not a very good answer to the councillor who asked, but I actually believe that if the committee is making an honest decision based on the case that's before it, I don't believe that there is any great duty of care to be afraid of, because you're discharging your duty in accordance with the law. And the other thing, before I stop boring you, just bear with me 1 second. I just think I need to emphasise the fact that should members be minded to refuse this application contrary to officer recommendation, they will already be aware, no doubt, that there may be a cost implication to the council, because we will have to have material reasons as to why the application's being refused, and the developer in those circumstances may well appeal, but there would be a possibility of exposure to costs, and I wanted to make that clear because it would be remiss of me not to. Thank you, Chair.
Understood. Thank you very much, Stephen. Most clear to us.
Thank you.
Councillor Jill Mercer was next for a second question.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm going to come back to this barrier, and just got a few questions more to ask of Patrick. First of all, you mentioned that there was a steel barrier on the plans. We couldn't really see that with the detail that we get. But can you tell me, first of all, does that go all the way along to West Street? Because you didn't know the width of one part of it, but it is quite narrow. If the vegetation was taken away, it would obviously be a little bit wider, but then you would have a sheer drop for danger. If we were minded to grant this application, there was no condition about that barrier. I would want to see, at the very least, that the barrier goes all the way along. And I mean, when you have these conditions, you usually say you have to come back to the details of what the landscaping or whatever is, and then that would give the officers a chance to check that that barrier was sufficient to enable cars not to veer over the side or people to easily fall over it. So I've got a couple of other questions, but could you come back on that first?
Patrick?
Yes. I mean, in short, I think a condition requiring the details of the barrier would be perfectly reasonable. You're right, we don't have anything beyond what we have on the site plan, which indicates simply by annotation a safety barrier. But no, we don't have details of an elevation and showing the height and so on. So I think that'd be perfectly reasonable to require that, or require that by condition, require details by condition to be submitted and approved. And we can specify that the barrier should reach the junction with West Street as well.
Thank
Thank you.
you, Patrick.
My next
another question.
Yeah, my next comment is still on that axis. You mentioned there'd be no large vehicles. Presumably, then are you saying that all of the deliveries will be done to the road at the front? Because obviously, as we've seen, it's constrained there for parking. Are you saying that they were told that no deliveries, and is there any condition that stops them doing that?
That's right. The proposal is that deliveries would be off the high street. I also understand from the submission that that's how the pub, the Feathers and its various other names, That's how it operated in terms of having deliveries from the high street. In terms of restrictions, I'm not necessarily sure about restrictions by condition. It could possibly be an informative to suggest that any deliveries are by the off the high street.
Okay. Next is, you didn't answer my question about what happens if somebody parks. It's only one width of car. If somebody was parked there, then you wouldn't get past. What would happen then?
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's it's probably something that would have to be perhaps managed by a signage or something that would make it clear that it is an exit, whether it may be something painted on the tarmac exit itself. Again, it could conceivably, I'm thinking aloud here, but that could possibly be a condition to require details to signpost at the point where, with the junction West Street, that this is an exit and no parking shall take place in that point.
So what we're saying is that we're giving somebody permission to use this access, fair enough, but we're saying that none of the other shops or premises along there are allowed to park there. Are we allowed to say that?
Well, it's not so much we're not saying they can't. We have this, the site is in the applicant's ownership, notwithstanding ownership isn't a planning consideration. But as it stands, there's nothing to indicate that they have the right to park there in any event. So, and I think the agent mentioned they would be amenable to making arrangements to ensure that any emergency exits, I believe it's simply emergency exits at the back of those properties onto that sort of unkempt land. That possibility would still exist. They could still get out, and I think in the update sheet I refer to it, if anything, being an improvement, because anyone exiting in an emergency would be going onto a tarmac paved route rather than a overgrown shrubbery area, which is less easy to manoeuvre on. So yeah, it's not that they don't, it's not their land, it's outside of the adjacent property, and this is simply using the applicant's site and what we understand to be the applicant's land, and any other routes and arrangements will carry on taking place as they currently do.
Right, and finally, there was the question of the number of flats and the impact on parking, and you mentioned about the number of parking spaces, but didn't NCC actually object on the basis that it didn't have enough parking? Or didn't they just say that there ought to be 43?
Yes, they referred to the standards or the guidance in terms of parking numbers or parking spaces for different uses. That's, of course, as we have a sort of split use development here, residential and commercial. In terms of the commercial, the residential element of the proposal is one space per flat, which meets the requirements. So in terms of residential, that's met. Where any perceived shortfall or shortfall in comparison to the guidance is the commercial space at ground floor. So in terms of this floor space, their guidance will say X number of spaces per X number of square meters. It doesn't meet the numbers that their guidance would ideally meet, but of course, as far as we're concerned in terms of assessing a planning application, we have a pub there which equally has no real formal parking other than a bit of a car parking out the back of the same floor space. So in terms of the ground floor, there's effectively a sort of nil impact, because you've got a pub with seemingly no parking other than what may have been used previously. And this actually provides a bit more formal parking out the back for staff.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Lee, you will want another question. Lee, put your microphone on.
Okay, thanks, Chairman. Sorry, it went on and went off again. Thanks to Patrick for trying to answer the question about the how wide the road is at the back of number 110A. And I can appreciate that that he doesn't know that we don't know that. What I can't really understand is the argument that we don't know it, but it doesn't matter because there aren't going to be any large vehicles going down that road because delivery lorries are going to have to park on the road. And maybe that's true. Maybe delivery lorries are going to park on the road. But what about removals lorries? We've got a whole load of people that are going to move into flats here. Presumably they're going to have furniture. So there's going to be removals lorries that have got to park somewhere. What happens if one of the residents' cars breaks down and they have to get a recovery truck? They can't push that car onto the highway because the road's not wide enough to let it down. Or indeed, if they want to do some work on the house and they need a skip delivering, the skip would normally be delivered into the car park of the flats. But if the entrance and the exit are too narrow to allow the skip lorry, then surely they're just not suitable for the purpose they're intended. So I find it strange that I can appreciate we don't know the width, but I think we need to know the width. It looks really narrow on the plan. It is certainly narrower than the rest of the road, and it's going to have an impact on those residents. So we need to know.
Okay.
I'm happy to answer that, Councillor Stern, if that's.
Hang on, I've got some people that have asked before to speak again. Councillor Mercer, one last question, dare I say.
I think Councillor Barbara Jenny's before me in the queue, Chairman.
Just put your question, please.
Right, my question's quite a simple one. We're saying that this development will have a one-way route coming from the high street just to the edge of the building, then down through the car park, then turning right and going out through the lane. But for the existing properties that back onto there, they have two-way access to this road because that's an existing right of access. How can we determine a planning application which says that there's going to be one way there when there's an existing two-way which we have no authority over?
Okay. Councillor Jackson, you had a question.
Councillor Jackson isn't present.
Oh, okay.
We have Councillor Barbara Jenny.
Yes, I understand. It's her application, so I was saving her till last. Councillor Underwood.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I'd just like to point out at the bottom of West Street, there's a huge car park, which I use quite regularly to go to one of the shops, which has a parking space within that car park. I'm guessing, but I would suggest that car park takes 20 spaces. And therefore, just to remind members, there is a huge car park at the bottom of West Street, which is used by personnel for the shops in the high street.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. So, Barbara, you I think you probably have a question, but I also need a proposal when you put your question.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I did have some questions of the officers. The Environmental Protection and the Commercial Health team have both said that extraction for the kitchen must be in use at all times, and I appreciate he's mentioned the windows and the extraction, but if this is on all evening or all day when the restaurant is open, how does this impact on the occupants of the flats above who may be out and enjoying the balcony to their flat? They're subjected to noise, odour and goodness knows what else.
Do we have an officer? Patrick, can you take that one?
Yes, I'll answer that one. Trying to look at the precise condition requiring details of ventilation and extraction. Excuse me, I'm looking for the condition itself. Right, excuse me. I'm on the wrong page. Right. Condition 4. Condition 4 deals with the extraction and treatments of fumes and odours. I would expect that we can also add to that noise as well. It's not uncommon for us as a planning department to deal with applications for extraction units for restaurants and the like. Basically, we as an authority would have the control to deal with making sure any equipment fitted is acceptable in terms of the proximity to residential properties. So we have that control, and we'd have the condition to require those details. I'll try and quickly answer a couple of other points. In terms of, I think it was Councillor Wilkes' comments in terms of the width of the access. The width of a parking space in terms of guidance is 2.4 metres. The width, having walked down it, is clearly far in excess of 2.4 metres. From simply memory and visuals, it's likely to be over 4 metres. In terms of, I know it's mentioned in terms of deliveries and sort of larger vehicles accessing the properties and moving in and out. It's worth being aware of is the residential properties are actually accessed off the high street, so there'd be no need for any van to go into the car park, because they'd need to go to the high street to deliver off the high street into the door up to the flat. So there's simply no need. That's where the access is. In terms of Councillor Andy Mercer's comments, just briefly, it's in terms of the access at the back being a two-way. Well, in a way, it could be viewed as a two-way. It's effectively informal. It's an informal access behind buildings. We do, in terms of the question itself, we do have the right as a planning department to install a one-way system, particularly where we are dealing with the applicant and the applicant's land. So we are quite within our right to permit a development which is one way, particularly where we are minded and acknowledge that there are emergency exits at the back of these properties, but we're also content that it is perfectly reasonable to think that it will still be possible for those emergency accesses to still be in use. I think that answers those questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick.
Right.
That, I think, concludes the debate.
Well, I've got one more point to raise. Can you repeat for me the answer to my question, because I think I've missed it. Can there be a condition added that the flats cannot be occupied until the business is established? And I'd like to know if the legal officer supports the view.
So just so I understand, are you suggesting a condition be applied that says no flats be occupied until there's a ground floor restaurant or business or whatever it be termed? I mean, my general thinking on that is no, that wouldn't meet the tests of requirements or planning conditions. They have to be reasonable, necessary, enforceable, and because the two aren't reliant on each other, I just don't think that could be deemed as necessary and reasonable in this context.
Okay.
Can I ask if the legal officer supports that view, please?
Evening, Councillor. Yeah, I would concur 100%. I don't think that particular condition or any condition that seek to limit when flats could be either sold and or occupied would be enforceable, because it wouldn't be viewed as being either fair or relevant to the application.
Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you.
Yeah. Chairman, sorry, Chairman, really quickly, Councillor Jill Mercer had one more question.
Yes, I understand that.
It wasn't so much a question, it was sorry,
hang on. Before we go to a proposal from the ward member, we've got one more condition that Jill Mercer wishes to put. Can we have that? Then we'll close the debate finally.
Yes, certainly, Chairman. Yes, I've already suggested one condition regarding the barrier. If the officers could make sure that that goes on. But I was just wondering whether we might be able to ask for another condition, that there is signage to indicate the one-way system. And how, I don't know whether we can do that as a condition or informative, but I think it's going to be necessary to make this workable.
My view is yes, that could be a reasonable condition. Yeah, to require details of signage.
Thank you.
Your papers. Thank you. Right. Now, debate closed. Can we have a proposal, please, Barbara?
Yes, I'd love to give you a proposal. I'm not sure that the signage that you've just agreed to establish a one-way system works fairly for the other occupants of the businesses, because their only means of access now is via the Feathers access in order to use that one-way system. This is a very difficult balance. It's weighing up bringing a building back into use, which is a business. We accept that there will be employment attached to that, which is welcomed. It also brings flats. The issue for me is, do the issues created by the 8 flats override granting the application? I don't think we have answers to all the questions yet. So I'm going to propose that we refuse this application, and I'm hoping that some of my colleagues will come up with some adequate reasons for supporting that refusal.
Can I have a seconder for that refusal, please?
Councillor Stern, can I just suggest that we need to have reasons first before we have a seconder? Okay. And they need to be material reasons.
So, around the table, anyone got specific planning reasons for refusal? Have you not got any yourself, Barbara?
Well, I do have concerns regarding the waste collection. I feel that is inadequate. I am struggling, to be honest. It is a very fine balance.
Yeah. Well, we have to have good reasons. We can warn twice that we could be appealed and lose that appeal if we haven't got good, strong reasons for refusal. So we need now to actually identify them.
I'd also point out that the waste matter, it can be covered by condition as well, just to remind you of that.
Okay. Well, there was no overwhelming support for this application to be refused. So if one of my colleagues wants to put forward a proposal to grant, then I will defer to them.
Chairman,
Chairman,
the officer just said that we could have on the waste, have a condition. Would that be possible to add? To make sure that the waste is sufficiently
yeah, if I'm answering this, yes, we do. Condition 7 should cover that as it stands, but it could possibly be tweaked to refer to both residential and commercial waste.
I think if you could, that would be useful. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick. Make sure that's done. So, have we got any other member that has a proposal? Andy, your hand's up.
I was merely going to ask that if we're minded and moving towards a proposal to grant of some sort, can we have the exact wording of the condition that will deal with the boundary fence between this development and the ENC car park, just to be on the safe side that the boundary treatment is suitable?
Could we not leave that to officers and the ward member and? No?
I'm happy to leave it to the officers and the ward member and the chair and vice chair if that's your proposal, Chair.
I'm suggesting it.
I would agree with that, Chair.
So let's get that one out of the way, that the officers would decide that one with the ward member, chair, vice chairs.
Can I just confirm it is just that one condition and not the one relating to the signage as well, because that was an additional condition that you'd requested, should you approve?
I think all three conditions that we changed slightly. There's the waste one that's just to be tweaked, the signage one, and the barrier.
Brilliant, thank you.
Okay, so with that out of the way, can I have a proposal, please?
Chairman, I'm not prepared to propose for grant. If one of my colleagues wish to do that,
Well,
then
they're not coming forward. They've all heard me ask.
Okay, well, there's no one coming forward to support an application to refuse, a proposal to refuse. I don't think I really have any choice in this matter, much as I regret it. I feel we have no choice but to grant the application subject to the conditions to be worked out.
Three conditions. That's your proposal, is it, Barbara?
Reluctantly, yes.
Understand. And can I have a seconder for that? Lance? Lance, are you seconding?
Councillor Smith?
Yes, I am. Yes, I am.
Thank you. So that's proposed and seconded. We'll go to a vote. I'll do a round robin because it is quite complicated. So we are proposing accepting officer advice. Will you say you agree with that or against that? Firstly, Councillor Hughes.
Sorry, I'm unmuted. Abstain.
Bert Jackson.
Not present.
Not present. Sorry. Barbara Jenny. I guess you can't really.
Grant, reluctant.
You're proposing, so leave it at that for the moment. Councillor Jones, you're seconding it.
I've seconded.
Councillor Andy Mercer.
With deep reluctance, accepting the proposal.
Councillor Jill Mercer.
Ditto, for, but reluctantly.
Okay, Councillor Harriet Pentland.
Acceptance of the proposal.
Councillor Shacklock.
For the proposal.
Councillor Smith.
For the proposal, Chair.
Councillor Thomas.
For the proposal.
Councillor Underwood.
For the proposal. Reluctantly.
And Councillor Lee Wilkes.
For the proposal.
Have we got the numbers there, Charlie?
Yes, Chairman, that's 10 for the motion with 1 abstention, so the motion is carried.
Thank you very much. Well done, members. A good debate. And thank you for your cooperation in that, because I understand not everyone is happy with everything there, but that's what we're here for. It's 8:20 already, so we've nearly spent 2 hours on that, but we have to do it. So we move to the second proposal,
Councillor Stern, sorry to interrupt. Can I just ask you if you wanted to take a vote on continuing the meeting, and if so, can you confirm which applications will be discussed so that we can let the speakers know whether or not their item will be heard tonight?
Okay, so you can see we've got 10 minutes of time left within the 2-hour period, which we can go on for, and we've got still 1, 2, 3 applications to cover. I'm not sure how long they're going to take, but we're not, I don't think, going to get through 3. We're not going to get through 1 in real time. So if you're happy to extend the meeting to get as much done as we can put a final timeline on it of, say, 9:30.
Chairman, if it helps you, the Earthlingborough application is next. I am certain that isn't going to take anywhere near as long as that Rushton application took.
Fine, okay.
Chair.
So, happy that we go till 9:30.
Can I suggest, Chair, that we go to the end of the Earthlingborough one, because after that, I don't know what's going to happen.
Okay.
I'll second that, Chairman.
Got a thought on that, Robin?
Yeah, I'll second Councillor Mercer's idea.
Anyone else got any thoughts?
Well, I think if Earthling's going to go quite quickly, I could get through Raunds quite quickly, and you know, if we're going to extend, then let's put a guillotine on at 9:30. This will be the 3rd time I've come prepared to go through this application for Kingswood House, and you know, we've got to get this stuff done, and you know, and members' comments must be restricted to planning issues.
Councillor Stone, could I possibly advise that you do the meeting to 9:30 in the hope that you can cover the next 2 items?
Yes, we've had comments of 2 ways of doing it, but I think the best way is that we crack on as much as we can, as quickly as we can, get as much done as we can, because these applications have been coming and going and not getting sorted. So if you're all happy, can I have someone to move that we extend the meeting until 9:30?
I'm happy to do that, Chairman. I have to say the Twywell one, now that many of the issues have been resolved, won't take too long.
I'm happy to second that.
So that's proposed and seconded. Those in favour say aye.
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 Against,
Aye.
no. That's carried. Right, okay, so let's crack on. Do we have any thoughts that we want? Officers, do we want to do the Earthlingborough one as it's listed next?
From my view, that would be preferable, because it was at the last committee and was deferred. So, we really wouldn't want to defer this one.
Go on with Earthlingborough. I think we probably have to say at this particular juncture, we're not going to get to Twywell. If the speakers are there, we might be able to do the Kingswood House one, but that's a warning for the speakers, really. But I think we've just got to be a bit careful there, because we might get round to it. They're not there to speak, so we get ourselves in the foot. So let's just carry on with the next one on page 20, which is the College Street Earthlingborough application. Is this yours, Patrick?
It is.
You got short straw tonight, didn't you?
Yes. Yes.
Crack on as quickly as you can.
Okay. Okay. This is application 19/01935/FUL. It's an application for 1 dwelling, 3-bedroom dwelling, as well as the associated parking and amenity space. We're talking about a site at 28 College Street in Earthlingborough. The recommendation is for approval as set out in the committee report before yourselves. In terms of the surroundings, members should hopefully be aware of the context. The arrow should hopefully be able to see it, identify it on the corner. That's number 28. It has space to its side. This is College Street, where my cursor is here. What we have here, the site is beside a junction with Nursery Gardens, which is a private unadopted road which serves a number of residential properties off it down there. And if I zoom in a bit more here, it's excuse me, this gives another image of the site. So we have number 28 here, the actual property itself. As you can see, this is the space to the side of the house itself. There's a garage at the moment, or I believe it recently may have been demolished, and there's a sort of garden, not allotment, but planting area here, as well as 28 also has this space here as its garden. So it has a reasonable, quite a large external amount of garden space and area. Just as well, it's worth being aware. So we have College Street here, and then we have nursery gardens, and in where the sort of lighter area is, that's gravel. That's a gravel driveway that currently serves an access for number 28, and this property here, I think it's number 4, but the number escapes me, and this property here. So this access here serves 3 properties currently. In terms of the proposal itself, we've got the site plan in front of us here. So we have a detached dwelling beside number 28. So there's a gap in between, and it's proposed to divide the 2 properties with boundary fencing in between. So the new dwelling is shown to have its garden space both to the front, as well as sort of some patio around the back and side, and on the left hand side as we look at it, as well as garden space here. In terms of the parking arrangement proposed, we have 2 spaces proposed for the new dwelling to be here, and these 2 spaces are shown and proposed to be serving number 28. We've got a new shed shown, as well as space for bins. Also, I think another slide may show this more clearly, but what part of the proposal is around 2 meters of the wall. We've got a wall here running alongside nursery gardens. Around 2 meters is proposed to be removed. That would increase the visibility for motorists when leaving the site looking down nursery gardens. Yes, we have a plan showing this in slightly clearer detail. This is an extract from the submitted plan showing that partial wall removal. In terms of the house itself, we have 2 of the proposed elevations in front of us. On the left-hand side, we have the proposed front elevation. As you can see, it's a fairly traditional brick frontage, including a bay window. We have the side elevation on the southwest side in front of us as well. So the frontage is on the right as we're looking at it. The proposed rear elevation on the left-hand side, and on the right-hand side we have the side elevation that would border number 28. This plan is an extract from the proposed street scene. It gives an indication in terms of the scale of the building, in particular in terms of the height as well, in just terms of is pretty much an identical height to the adjacent number 28, and gives it's also worth being aware, or members will be aware, that there's a steps up to number 28, and that relationship would continue with this property due to the change in land levels. I'll quickly go through a couple of photos, but this is the taken from nursery gardens, looking into the gravel driveway and the side of number 28, and this is the part of the wall essentially that will be removed, or proposed to be removed, 2 meters. As you can see, there's the flat roof garage there in front of us, sort of the space to the side of number 28. Another view of the garage here in the side of 28 in the rear. This is a view taken from nursery gardens down towards College Street. It also gives you a sense of some of the architecture and immediate vicinity. It's worth being aware we are in the conservation area here. We're relatively close to the edge, but we are in the conservation area itself. As you can see, you can just about make out on the right hand side there's a pavement on the side of the road that we have here. This is a view taken from further up Nursery Gardens, facing down towards College Street. So what we have on the left, these are relatively new, or they are new bungalows, which are the subject of the planning permission granted recently. It's referred to in the reports. It also gives an indication of Nursery Gardens itself. It's wider at this point, but as you can see, it does narrow down closer to the application site for width, and you have a footpath that sort of runs the length of pretty much the whole of Nursery Gardens. This is facing in the opposite direction, just give you a sense of Nursery Gardens itself, its width, the nature of the dwellings in the nearby vicinity. Okay, another view of Nursery Gardens, and again we have these bungalows recently constructed there. Again, this view is the access on the left-hand side, facing down towards College Street. This is the junction with College Street itself. Gives you a sense of the buildings nearby and the nature of the junction in terms of access. In terms of planning considerations, I'm not going to spend too long because it's all essentially in the report and in the updates. It's in terms of principle, we're obviously in the town, so in terms of provision of a dwelling, it's acceptable. The main matters here are considering the visual impact, particularly given we're in the conservation area. That's discussed in detail in the report and includes comments from the Council's Senior Conservation Officer. Excuse me. Access has been a matter for consideration as well, and that is discussed at length. Again, I'm not going to sort of account all the details here, but in terms of assessing and balancing that and how that has been considered. Residential amenity in terms of the relationship, in terms of privacy, the proposal is considered acceptable, and the application is recommended for approval for the reasons as set out in the report. Thank you, Chair.
We now move on to the speakers, please. There are 4 of those with this application. The first one is Mr. Murray Carville, who is an objector. Murray?
Hello, can you hear me?
Hello there.
Hi, good evening.
Yes.
We at number 2 and 4 Nursery Gardens use this same entrance as 28 College Street rear parking all day, every day. Squeezing another house onto this narrow piece of land will add more traffic to this very, very narrow exit onto Nursery Gardens. The issue of the access is a considerable safety issue. It's already been turned. We've already had a letter from the council to state no more building and access onto Nursery Gardens. At this junction, the road is only 3 metres wide. There is a footpath that is just short of a metre, which you cannot pass 2 cars on Nursery Gardens. If one car is coming up College Street and turning into Nursery Gardens whilst there's one coming down Nursery Gardens, the car that is in College Street has to reverse back out into the junction, which is highly dangerous. This junction is only 14 metres from the College Street junction, with the builder saying he's going to put in 1 splay by 2 metres, will reduce this junction to 12 metres from the already busy junction. Putting in 1 splay is not practical because I think the Highways Authority say you need 2 splays. Well, you can't use the other side of the junction of the exit because number 4 will not allow any of their land to be used. So basically, the safety thing needs to be adhered to from the local authority planning. They're advising the council that it's no good. The town council is also advising it's not safe. So we don't see how it can be approved at all. There's already been 2 accidents this year, one that we've had to go to court for a witness, and we don't want to add to all the traffic. The builder has also been refused another house further up the road for the access that was 64 metres away from this junction. If he is to put any houses else on this land, it needs also to match the surrounding houses. It doesn't match the surrounding houses, the drawing that is being proposed. It has one bay window. Both houses either side are double bay windows, up and down, and the block of houses opposite is bay windows up and down. This house is nothing like that, and I can assure you, once the plans are finished and it's built, it will look nothing like the plans either.
That's 3 minutes, Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you. You've had your 3 minutes, Murray.
Thank you.
Thanks for your input.
Right.
Let's move on to the next one, please. Next speaker. It's Councillor Carolyn Cross, who's representing Earthlingborough Town Council.
Good evening, Caroline Cross, Earthlingborough Town Council. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Oh, good. Conservation means preservation, restoration, consideration. Dwellings built in a conservation area must enhance and complement the existing street scene, not cause disruption to established residents, not cause traffic chaos, not disrespect a town's heritage. Nowhere is it written that a conservation area must be permitted to accommodate a single incongruous add-on which will require some mitigation to make it feasible. The NPPF states development should only be prevented or refused on highway grounds if there would be an unacceptable impact on highway safety or the residual cumulative impacts on the road network would be severe. The result of an ITC public consultation event last year found that traffic congestion and speeding is considered to be a problem in Earthlingborough, with many attributing this to a lack of speed cameras and overdevelopment causing the increase in traffic. Significant concerns were raised in relation to parking specifically on the high street and around schools. This new property would bring up to 3 more vehicles to add to the mayhem. The situation is already severe. The fact that this property would be the 3rd dwelling to take land from number 28 is beyond overdevelopment. It is saturation. It is unacceptable. To the developer, this is one more house to add to his portfolio. He'll have left his mark. For us, a permanent stain. He will move on and try his luck elsewhere. We will have to live with the consequences, just as we had to come to terms with his willful destruction of an orchard and an ancient barn to make way for the cramming in of bungalows in a Findon Road garden. The report states that the house at 28 College Street has a detached flat roof garage located within the site. Not true. It's now a heap of rubble. Yes, vandalism. Demolition in a conservation area needs planning permission. Was this submitted to and approved in writing by the LPA? 2 metres of ancient wall hacked off to improve visibility for unwanted vehicles. More vandalism and extremely visually unappealing. Would not enhance the conservation area. Please can we implore that this developer's bad behaviour is not rewarded again. Let us be principled and brave enough to put a stop to it right here in Earthlingborough. Let us say no, go, enough. We are worth more and the developer is worth enough. Overdevelopment, conflict with the character of the conservation area, inferior design, does not meet highway standards, other applications refused and no change in circumstances, visually damaging in the setting. Please refuse. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Councillor. We now move to Councillor Dorothy Maxwell for her 3 minutes. Dorothy, can you hear us?
Right. Okay, good evening, Chair, Vice Chair, Councillors, Officers and Residents. I'm speaking on behalf of the residents who live in Nursery Gardens. This application for a single 3-bedroom dwelling on the grounds of 28 College Street creates massive issues to the residents in 2 and 4 Nursery Gardens, who live adjacent to 28 College Street. I went to look at this site because when Mr Kennedy applied for 4 bungalows at 49 Farndon Road, these gardens were connected to 2 and 4 nursery gardens. And it was agreed then in 2018 not to have an exit onto nursery gardens, as this would create considerable dimensional impact on the residents who live opposite and the rear of 49 Farndon Road. Highways agreed that this application has to be refused, and it was refused on the grounds of overdevelopment. Then another application comes for 3 bungalows in Farndon Road. This was agreed, but no exit into nursery gardens. However, it seems without any consultation, 1, 2 and 4 and 14 other properties were not able to exit nursery gardens. Even though Northamptonshire Highways advised on this, how did it happen? What faith in planning process can residents have when this is allowed to happen? Where is the building control when this happened? Who allowed this to take place? Where was enforcement involved? This application for a single dwelling adjacent to 28 College Street, which will be in front of 2 and 4 nursery gardens. The house submitted by Mr. Sadi is not intrinsically impressive. It does not give a true dimensions of the build. It is also completely different to 28 College Street, Earthenborough. Earthenborough Town Council is concerned about the design, the fact it overlooks 2 and 4, which would leave them with no privacy and warrants serious consideration. This exit development into College has to be into College Street and not from 2 and 4 nursery gardens. It would prevent number 28, 4 and 2 exiting from their homes with over 8 cars already parked there. It does not include family, which could be another 4 cars. Northamptonshire Highways commented on 6.4 on page 53 of the report, clearly states they object to this proposal due to the fact that there are more than 5 dwellings off this private driveway. It states the following: the vehicle access serving 2 or 5 dwellings must have minimal width of 4.5 for the first 10 metres of this highway boundary. This enables 2 opposite vehicles to pass each other at the point of access. This proposal of the additional dwelling.
That's 3 minutes.
Thank you.
Can I just finish off?
That's your 3 minutes. We've got to be fair to everyone. And the last speaker on this application is Mr. John Sidey, who is the agent.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, members of the committee. Can I just start with, we believe this is a good scheme and it was supported initially by a positive pre-application. Subsequently, it's been recommended for approval. This would be a good use of underutilised land. The host dwelling would retain a large rear garden of over 30 metres in depth with ample off-road parking and the dwelling to plot ratio of just 12%. This would provide a 3-bedroom dwelling in keeping with the street scene and fulfilling an identified need. A dwelling in this location would also prevent use of greenbelt land. This has a plot ratio of just 23%. We were aware at an early stage of the objection lodged by the parish council. We adjusted initially the submitted design to match the ridge height of the adjacent dwelling and gained the support from the conservation officer in terms of its overall suitability. The proposed dwelling has a single height bay window to the front, as the majority of the dwellings to the east of this plot. The parish council also raised concerns with potential additional traffic using the junction of University Gardens and College Street. This is a single width road with a footpath to one side. We are aware of the normal width requiring of 4.8 metres to be compliant to allow vehicles to access and leave nursery gardens at the same time. However, in practice, this is unlikely to be maintained, and we have observed that many of the roads that lead off College Street generally have vehicles parked within the first few metres of the junction, both day and night, effectively reducing to single width. In this instance, the parked cars would be more of an obstruction than the unobstructed access of nursery gardens, which has been in use serving up to 20 dwellings without known accidents. The nature of the reduced width of the road effectively acts as a speed reduction measure, promoting lower speeds and careful use. College Street at this junction also has a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit. The main issue is the parked cars on College Street either side of the access, which can reduce visibility. The applicant has confirmed a willingness to make an application to County Highways to have a solid H line across the junction to prevent vehicles parking either side and pay for this work to be carried out. This would improve the visibility of the existing vehicles exiting the nursery gardens onto College Street, especially at busy periods. This has been carried out on other private roads leading off College Street. This could be made a condition of any of the approval. In conclusion, and as per the recommendation to approve, I hope the committee will see the merits of this scheme and will agree with the officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, that's the public speakers on this particular topic, and we now move to the ward member. Is that you, Lee?
It is indeed, Chairman, yes.
Good, fine. Well, you tell us what you think.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you to Mr. Reid for a clear and concise presentation, I thought, of the application. I'd also like to thank the speakers who took the time to speak quite eloquently about the application this evening. As ward members, as the ward member here, I'm going to keep this short for you all. Having listened to everything that's been said so far this evening and being fully versed in this application, I do find it extremely difficult to support the application. As we've all heard, there's been a number of objections to the application, including from Erthlingborough Town Council, that mention things like overdevelopment, the aesthetic impact on the conservation area, the danger of the junction between College Street and Nursery Gardens. And of course, we should all remember that whilst this application is defined as College Street, actually it's Nursery Gardens that the access comes off. And whilst all of those objections seem to be perfectly reasonable, I think I should focus on what I consider to be the serious objections from Highways. Too often on this committee, we bemoan the fact that Highways don't object to applications that seem on the face of it to be unsuitable. Well, with this application, we don't have a single objection from Highways. We have multiple objections from Highways. Clearly, Highways, like others have mentioned, believe that having yet another dwelling with access off Nursery Gardens, which is a substandard private road, would be unacceptable. Some sections of Nursery Gardens are, as has been said already this evening, only 3 metres wide. In fact, in their words, in Highways' own words, it would lead to an intensification of a substandard road and footpath. I guess that's probably why this committee previously refused permission for another development further along Nursery Gardens, further away from the junction with College Street. Now, there are other Highways objections. You're all going to be aware of them. You've all got your packs, but I'm aware of time this evening. So to keep things short, let me just focus on one of them. The access and the egress to this development appears to be dangerous, due primarily to the inability to provide visibility displays. Now, as my fellow members will be all too aware, Highways require a 2 metre by 2 metre visibility display at the entrance and the exit to a development. And of course, they want that for good reason. It reduces the chances of a vehicle leaving a site and knocking over a pedestrian or knocking a child off a bike. As we've just seen during the officer presentation, there was a photo, I forget which photo it was, but it was towards the end of the presentation, that showed actually how dangerous the exit from this site is. Children from neighbouring houses who wish to cycle to school, they have to cycle along the narrow, substandard Nursery Gardens. They have no choice, they live down the road. But due to the inability to provide the required visibility displays looking up Nursery Gardens, any vehicle that leaves the site would have to pull into the road. Actually, it would have to pull into the path of those cycling children to be able to see where the egress from the site was safe. And that just doesn't sit well with me. I'm interested to see what fellow members have to say, but I am finding it really difficult to disagree with Highways in their objections, and difficult to disagree that allowing a new property on this site will put children and pedestrians in danger. So at this juncture, I'll hand back to you, Chairman, for members' comments, I think, before making a formal proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilkes. So we'll do a round robin. If you've got something to say, please say it. If you've not, then say no and we'll pass on. So, Councillor Hughes.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, there is precedent to say that this road is too narrow for more development, and as Councillor Wilkes has pointed out, any vehicle having to leave this site would have to put its nose out right into the road, a very narrow road, really almost blocking the road, and then have to reverse back in again if there was something coming, because it wouldn't be able to make the turn on a very narrow road. And in fact, even getting 2 cars in there would be quite difficult. So I have to concur, I think we should object to this on highways grounds, apart from the fact that it does not fit actually with the conservation area.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Jenny.
I have no questions to ask, thank you.
Councillor Lance Jones.
I have no further comments.
Councillor Andy Mercer.
I can only endorse Councillor Wilkes's comments.
Councillor Jill Mercer.
Yes, I agree. This access is inadequate. We have agreed another exit onto this road further up for the other bungalows. However, that was quite away from the junction. This one has got 2 different problems. It's got one of the actual access itself, which isn't wide enough, and then having to stick your nose out into it. But at the point where it is so narrow that if there was another car coming, you would have an accident anyway. I was interested in a couple of other things, but I think in terms of keeping the meeting short, I would be happy to leave it there.
Councillor Pentland.
I concur with the highways concerns.
Okay, Councillor Shaplock.
I concur as well with the highways concerns. Some of the applications I've led on, I'd give my right arm to have highways object, and here we are, we've got them highways objecting to one.
Councillor Smith.
I have no further comments, Chair.
Councillor Thomas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just one point, excuse me. The access to the site is already in use, is that correct? And the access is to 2 dwellings to the left. So that has already been set, isn't it? So to talk about, this proposed development causing an issue when the issue is already there is difficult for me to comprehend.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Can you give us an answer to that, please? Officer, where's he gone?
So precisely what in terms of, is it already used by other properties?
Yes.
Yeah, it is, yes. The gravel driveway access, that serves number 28 and 2 other properties already. The only other, and again, I'm conscious of time, the only other brief comment I'd make or draw members' attention to is paragraph 7.18 of the report and 7.24. And just in terms of our consideration, or members' consideration, in terms of the highways comments and how they've been considered and the nature of them, highways provide us with their guidance, and it's worth being aware that there are other sites that have been considered both at committee and under delegated powers where highways have objected that have gone to appeal, and ultimately the inspector has assessed the particular circumstances of those developments and those accesses. So we have one in Jubilee Street itself, but also in Irthlingborough, which was subject to an appeal, I think it was last year or early this year, and the inspector allowed it where the visibility, both pedestrian and vehicular, was not at the standard. That the inspector took the judgment there. In that case, it was acceptable for 2 dwellings to be provided. And there's also another reference to the site off Newton Road in Rushden, which also didn't meet standards. But just in terms of our assessment, it's not necessarily a case of doesn't meet the highway standards, therefore it should be a refusal. It's always a matter of judgment in the particular circumstances themselves.
Thank you very much. Let's move on to Robin Underwood.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I would just like to make one comment. The officer referred to Newton Road, and in that instance there was a stage 1 safety audit undertaken. And I think this would answer the questions all about the access and the egress. So may I suggest, and get the opinion of the officers, whether a safety audit stage 1, which, as I say earlier, was carried out at Newton Road, Rushden, and the appeal was 1, whether that would be useful in determining this application, and to defer this application until a safety audit stage 1 can be carried out.
Patrick, do you have any response to that?
It's very difficult for me to give, I guess, an easy answer on that. Not knowing the nature of that particular safety audit at Newton Road and what a safety audit here would precisely be looking to assess. Yeah, it is very difficult for me to suggest if that would be necessary. It's perhaps more of a matter for a highways officer.
Yeah. So, as we stand, we have the application in front of us as it is. Councillor Wilkes, it's back to you, please. Your proposal.
I'll ask another question.
Just a minute, Councillor. Councillor Hughes, you have a...
Yeah, can you make it clear, is the access and egress on the narrow part of the road? Because if it's on the narrow part of the road, that's not the same as cars coming up and down Nursery Road. It's the actually access is coming out when it's only 3 metres wide. Is that correct? So in that case, it isn't the same thing as the vehicles going up and down the road. That's a different issue. This is the fact that it's 3 metres wide, which is 9 feet wide or so, and a car coming right out there, which would completely block the road for anything else coming up. Am I right in thinking that?
Patrick, do you have a response?
Yes, it is the part of the road which is narrower and essentially only 1 vehicle wide, plus... So
it's not the same as the vehicles going up and down. Thank you.
Okay, so Councillor Wilkes, can we have a proposal, please?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I haven't heard anything from members or officers to really convince me otherwise. I accept what Mr. Reid says about other applications, but of course we have to consider the application in front of us, and I'm not convinced that we're comparing apples with apples. On the basis that I do believe it's overdevelopment of the site, I do believe it's going to have a negative impact on the conservation area, and I do agree with highways objections. They mentioned that the parking bays are too small. They mentioned that there's a lack of visibility displays, which is my biggest concern because of the safety of children cycling up and down there. And they object on the basis that it is an intensification of a substandard road and footpath. So on the basis of all of that, Chairman, I propose that we object to this application.
Okay, so those reasons for refusal, I'll now open it up to others if they've got any questions or response to the reasons for refusal. Councillor Mercer, Andy.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to second Councillor Wilkes's proposal. I'd like to add this. Normally, we have to take into account the prospects of a potential appeal. And we're always regularly reminded that we could get costs against us. I find it very hard to see how we would get costs against us for going with the advice of the Highways Authority on a highways matter. Now, we may lose, but I can't see how we can get costs against us when we're using the highway's own reasons for refusal.
So there is a refusal from Councillor Wilkes. There is a seconding now from Councillor Mercer. So that's the debate. Can I go round, Robin, and say whether you agree with the refusal or do you want an acceptance?
Chair, before we go to vote, can I just confirm the reasons for refusal to make sure that I've noted them correctly?
Can you tell us again, please, Lee?
I can read them out to you. I can read them back to you what I've got. So I've got one reason as overdevelopment of the site, another reason as the impact on the conservation area, and the third reason for being the impact on highway safety in terms of the parking bays being too small, the lack of visibility display. And is that the pedestrian or vehicle visibility display?
It is both.
Both. And the intensification of use of the access as well.
Caroline, you summed those up perfectly.
Brilliant.
Yes. Fine. Are you happy with that, Caroline?
Yes. Sorry.
Yes, thank you.
Councillor Stern, if I just may interject there, on the parking bays, those highways comments related to a superseded plan, the size of the parking bays are acceptable, so I suggest that the size of the bays isn't a reason for refusal.
Okay, Chairman, in that case, I'm happy just to go with highways other objections and the overdevelopment and the negative impact.
Third option. So we're now going to go to a vote for following Councillor Wilkes' proposal to refuse, or whether you chose to accept. So we'll start with Councillor Hughes.
Refuse the application.
Councillor Barbara Jenny.
Refuse.
Councillor Jones.
Refuse.
Councillor Andy Mercer.
Refuse.
Councillor Jill Mercer.
Refuse.
Councillor Pentland.
Refuse.
Councillor Shacklock.
Refuse.
Councillor Smith.
Refuse.
Councillor Thomas.
Refuse.
Councillor Underwood.
Refuse.
And Councillor Wilkes is the last one, but you've already
I
said.
refuse.
So Charlie, what's the score on the doors?
Councillor Underwood, did you state your vote? Sorry.
Yes, I said refuse.
Thank you. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, that's unanimous 11 for the motion to refuse the application, Chairman.
Thank you. So that's that one conducted. And we're at 9 o'clock, so we've got half an hour left. Carolyn, is it your opinion that we can do either of the last two applications in half an hour, or both?
Yeah, if I refer to Dean, he may have more of an idea about how long his presentation is. I'm also not sure how many speakers there are on this item.
We don't speakers on Rawns one at all.
So we should be able to get through this one quite quickly.
Let's carry on with the Rawns one then. So page 35, 00709 full, Kingswood House, Rawns. Which officer is handling this one?
That's me.
That's me. Go on then, Dean.
Can everyone see this? Can everyone see the screen?
I can see your face.
Oh dear, hold on. Let's try that again.
Sorry, Councillor Shacklock is sharing his desktop. Councillor Shacklock, you need to unshare. That's it, Dean, you can go share yours now.
No more queue jumping, please. Right, can everyone see that?
We're getting, yes, we can now. Summary, yes. We've got the green and purple page.
On the map now?
Yeah.
Good, excellent. Right, so Kingswood House, Hollington Road, Rawns is an application that's been to committee before in January when I was on the holidays. Ros brought it to committee at that point. It was deferred for 3 reasons, which are shown on the slide here. It was recommended for approval last time and is again this time. The 3 reasons for deferral were to ask us to seek further information on the impact on housing supply, which you can see on paragraphs 4.1, 4.3 and 4.13 of the report. Further information on viability, you can see that on 4.16 to 4.27, and for members site visit. And we've done 2 virtual visits because the video didn't work properly the first time, so we had a second one on the 17th of July. You'll see also on the update sheet there's information responding to questions that were raised at those virtual site visits relating to occupancy and refuse collection. In terms of consultee responses, the only consultee who is objecting is the Town Council. Nobody else has objected on their technical grounds. And I would draw your attention particularly to NCC Adult Social Services, who place residents in this and other care homes in the area. The reasons are given in the report for that, but essentially there is more of a trend now towards moving people into their own homes for care rather than into care homes where possible. So all the other consultees have not objected to the application. This is the existing site plan. The main house is shown inside the red square. It's a 2-storey building with loft space. The remainder of the site is all single-storey. That's the main house. You see the single-storey properties which wrap around to the left and then behind. The proposed site plan is not much different to what the existing site plan is. The main change is this area here, where the parking area would replace what is a landscaped area currently. Up to 20 spaces now. Previously it was 19, so we've got an extra space included. The area where the red square is where they're proposing a pitched roof on part of the flat roof of the property. That is shown on the elevations here inside the larger squares. The smaller ones are where window and door changes are proposed. There's no overlooking issues or anything because the boundaries, as you will see from the next but one slide, again, this is all window and door changes, very minor. The boundaries to both sides have got fencing and walls, so there's no prospect of overlooking or being overlooked. This path that runs around the outside of the building would effectively be divided up, so each property would get a piece of it. So just going back to the site plan, I'll just show you that the footpath runs around the outside of the building, so it's wider here and narrower here, as per the previous picture. So the summary, I'm only going to summarise the deferred matters because the rest of them were debated at the previous meeting and the recommendation remains the same. On housing, the application would reflect local need. The properties are also space standard compliant and it would reuse a previously developed site in a sustainable location. On viability, it's not a viable business effectively, with no realistic prospect of it becoming like that in the sort of short to medium term. And it would have made consistent losses since 2016 if the applicant wasn't funding it from his own pocket effectively. The building it's a pleasant building, but it's not really a modern care home internally. There's staircases, there's narrow hallways and steps on the single-storey part of it as well. It's not able to be used to full capacity, will require a significant amount of investment, which the applicant has tried but not been able to get. They've tried to sell it, they've not succeeded in doing that either. And as I put in the second to last bullet point, the county council who place residents in this care home, they don't object because the trend is towards caring for people in their own home. So demand for care homes such as this is actually going to decrease over time, not increase. So the recommendation before you this evening is, as it was back in January, to approve subject to conditions and 106 agreement, to secure early years education, libraries. There's a slight change to the affordable housing proposal I've put there, which is the very last thing on the update sheet on this item. The minimum 10% is unchanged, but I've also put an off-site contribution as a fallback position because some affordable housing providers won't take single properties. They prefer to have them in clusters. So if the applicant is unable to find an affordable housing provider to take one of the properties, it would seem to be reasonable to allow them to do an off-site contribution instead, but they would have to go through that exercise first. And then finally, the SPA mitigation, which is required for all new properties. So apart from the amended condition 12 on the update sheet, which has been reworded to clarify communal refuse rather than individual wheelie bins for each property, the recommendation is to approve. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Excellent. Lance, is this in your area?
Yes, it is, Chair. Yeah.
Okay, then. We don't seem to have any speakers, so will you give us your input, please?
Sure. So thanks very much indeed, Dean, and for the subsequent updates and rearranged site visits. I think that was helpful. So I've tried to weigh up the balances on this from my own point of view, and what I can see is that this development provides for smaller accommodation in Raunds on a brownfield site. It's close to town and to school for whom that's for those for whom that is important. The care home undoubtedly is the wrong type of care home in the wrong place, and obviously the building isn't saleable at an acceptable price as far as the current owner is concerned. We have to recognise that this proposal represents an opportunity for economic activity and construction in Raunds at this sort of difficult time, and recognising the comments from Adult Social Care, there is a downturn in demand for this type of care, because of those possibly who will have been taken early during COVID-19, and also the shift to house people in their own homes. I recognise that there is a contribution to Raunds Library, and I'm sorry that Peter isn't here to hear that this evening, and also funding of early years schooling, again reflecting perhaps the likely market for these homes. And in addition, there is obviously the provision of affordable homes or contribution through Section 106. Against it, I can see that it doesn't really fit in the sort of development that Raunds and would have wanted to be in place. I recognise that. And there is a loss of care home places also, which is to be regretted without a doubt. It's a shame that we didn't get it into the neighbourhood plan to try and preserve this sort of amenity. Also against, I thought the accountant's report was pretty weak. Any accountant can make any report appear what they want it to be. I'd like to have seen figures on turnover. I could only infer those. And I can see the tree objection and obviously the disruption to residents during the course of redevelopment. I also note that the local highways authority does not have any particular objections with this. So seeing that the 106 proposals seem to be quite substantial in this as well. I do have in mind a proposal, but just before I do so, I would welcome the views of colleagues.
Okay, let's do a quick round robin again. If you have comments, fine, let's hear them. If not, pass. Councillor Dudley Hughes.
No comments at the moment.
Barbara Jenny.
I support the comments made by the ward member. My only concern about this is the complete lack of private amenity space for these what are effectively flats, single-storey dwellings. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Andy Mercer.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I support the comments of the ward member, but I'll go a bit further than that. We held an in-person site visit there before the pandemic came. At that point, for some years, the move had been going towards this sort of dwelling instead of putting people in care homes. But the pandemic has changed the whole scene. So when we first looked at this application, it was a different type of situation we were facing. From now onwards, there's going to be strong pressure to use this sort of dwelling for elderly people and have people coming around to look after them rather than putting them in care homes, because it's just going to be too dangerous for the next few years. So I would strongly support the ward member on this one.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Jill Mercer.
Nothing to add, Chair.
Councillor Pentland.
No comments, Chair.
Councillor Shacklock.
No comments, Chair.
Councillor Smith.
No further comments, Chair.
Councillor Thomas.
Yes, I'd like to support the ward member, and I'd like to second that proposal if that's required. Thank you.
Not just yet, but okay. Councillor Underwood.
No comment, Chairman.
Councillor Lee Wilkes.
Thank you, Chairman. I do have a comment, really, as you would imagine, because I live here. I fully appreciate if this building isn't suitable as a going concern moving forwards. And I would probably agree that it doesn't appear to be suitable as a going concern as a care home, but produce a better plan. Just because it isn't suitable as a care home doesn't mean that a plan should come forward to cram as many properties on as is possible. There is just no private amenity space for these, and I would argue that it just doesn't provide good design, and because of that it is in conflict with policy R2 of Raunds neighbourhood plan about producing high quality space. So I agree. It won't work. It probably won't work as a care home, but there must be a better design with less properties that mean it isn't quite so crammed on.
It might be, but it's not the one we're looking at tonight. Thank you, Councillor. So, Lance, we've been round the table. Can I have a proposal now, please?
I'm not sure if Dudley's trying to attract your attention.
I am waving like mad.
I can't see. Go on, Dudley, quick.
Am I right in thinking that the space by the trees and around there is some sort of amenity space? Is that because, I mean, where do these people go for a little walk? Because you can't walk around the streets there. So is this going to be some sort of, if it's going to be children, or is it going to be some sort of little playground or something around that space on the right hand side of our plan? Is that going to be some sort of amenity space that's available to use?
Yes, it is.
The officer
Yes.
can answer.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, I must say I agree with Councillor Wilkes that it's a shame that we produce properties without any amenity space, not even a yard to have a little barbecue or something in it. I think it's a shame we do have to produce in a town like Raunds. We have to cram these number of spaces in. If it had been 7 or 8 with a little tiny yard for each one, it would be much better.
Okay. Lance, proposal, please.
Thanks very much indeed, Chair. So I propose that we accept the officer's recommendation to grant approval for this planning application.
Seconder, please.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Peter Thomas.
Thank you very much, Peter. So that's proposed and accepted that we accept the application, and seconded. We'll go around for a vote, please. And again, we'll have to do it round houses. So the vote is that the proposal is for acceptance of the officer advice. And can we have the comments of Councillor Hughes, please?
I'm against on the grounds of overdevelopment of the site.
Councillor Jenny?
For the proposal.
Councillor Jones?
As proposed, for the proposal.
You probably don't need to vote them, do you? Councillor Andy Mercer?
For the proposal, Chairman.
Councillor Jill Mercer?
For.
Councillor Pentland?
Abstain.
Councillor Shatlock?
For.
Councillor Smith?
For the proposal, Chair.
Councillor Thomas?
Seconded, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Underwood?
For, Chairman.
And lastly, Councillor Wilkes.
Thank you, Chairman. On the basis of overdevelopment, I'm against.
Right. What's the score on that, please, Charlie?
Thank you, Chairman. There are 7 votes for the motion, 2 against the motion and 1 abstention. The motion to accept the recommendation to grant the application is carried.
Thank you very much. Now, we're faced with the timing, aren't we? We've got 1 application to go. Dudley suggests won't take very long because most of it's been completed, and we've got a quarter of an hour. But we also have 3 speakers, so I doubt that we can get it done in a quarter of an hour. Can I have some advice from Charlie or Louise? Can we get halfway through this application and leave it, or are we better off not starting it?
You're better off to either start it and see it through to the end, or not start it at all. It would get quite messy if you leave it halfway, but it's your call, Chairman.
So we can tackle the application tonight, which I'd rather we did because it gets it out of the way. And it's been here a few times, but it may take us beyond the 9:30 point. Are you happy for us to do that?
If someone could propose that they would extend the meeting again beyond the 3 agreed.
I want some comments first. Anyone against extending it if we have to get rid of this last one?
I would like to see this go through if possible, because we have already deferred it once, and therefore, in the ground, to be fair to the people speaking, I think we should resolve it one way or the other.
Okay, thank you. I'm inclined to agree with that. So, in absence of anyone else's comments, we will go through this one and finish it, and that will mean us extending beyond the 9:30 limit that we originally did. Can I have a proposal for extending beyond 9:30 to get this last application done? Can I have a seconder for that?
Seconded.
Yeah, I'll second that.
And then in terms of voting, all those in favour say aye.
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 Anyone against?
Aye.
Anyone against say no. That's carried. So let's crack on. Page 61, 1901 for Flywell. Who's the officer on this one?
It's me, Chair.
You've got a rough night, haven't you? Come on then, let's get through it quickly because we've done it all before, haven't we, in this one?
We have, hang on. Okay, hopefully you can see the opening slide. Application 1901/1901/Gethy-Well. As mentioned, this was at committee back in May, I believe it was. It's an application for 3 dwellings on land to the rear of 57 High Street in Twywell. Members may recall back in May, the application was deferred to enable negotiations to take place regarding the improvement of the visibility displays. So it was essentially, that was the only matter or only reason for the deferral. Again, I'm not going to take too long because we will be familiar with the site. It's on the northeastern side of the High Street, but of course, particularly here, what's primarily pertinent to our consideration this evening is the visibility along the High Street. So if I go to the next slide, this is obviously an aerial image of the site. What we have, if you can see my cursor, that's the junction with the High Street. So we're talking about the visibility out of this junction. And specifically, we're talking about the visibility to the northwest, or left as we look at it on the screen, rather than to the east. The east is already shown to meet the requirement. It's to the west where there is a shortfall as far as the guidance is concerned. And that's where the amended plan has come in to improve that visibility. It's worth being aware, back in May, the recommendation was for approval, as is the case here, but what the deferral allowed for was an improvement to the visibility possible as part of the proposal. I've got an extract in front of us here of the amended site plan. As you can see, well, it's not necessarily immediately obvious, but the actual access itself is moved around 2.5 meters to the east or right as we look at it, to that was considered back in May. They've done this, as in the applicant has done this, by removing or proposing to remove part of the wall at the frontage, allowing the access to move to the right, closer to this property as it were, which gives a greater extent of visibility to the northwest at the High Street. The other matter or change to be aware of is in terms of the parking. You may recall there's 5 spaces to the north, or yeah, is to the north of 57, and it was discussed that it would be preferable for members if 2 of these spaces were to be served only serving number 57, because currently they don't have any formal parking. So part of the amended plan shows these 2 spaces, I guess essentially nursery access, to be allocated to number 57. This is a further image from that amended plan. As members will recall, the road actually curves on this side, on the right, as we look, sort of curves away from the access, so it actually improves the visibility from the site. So the access, both for vehicles travelling northwest towards the site, is actually pretty good. You can see the access from a good distance, and as you can see, they're showing a 2x43 visibility there. Where we have the visibility that isn't to 43 meters is to the west or northwest, due to there's a wall, the junction or that abuts Woodland Cottage. So by moving the access to the east, visibility has been improved several meters to for any vehicles leaving the site looking northwest. Again, I'll quickly go through these photos. On the top left, we have looking down sort of southeast. So we have the access. It's just out of, well, it's on the left-hand side. It's perhaps difficult to make out on the left-hand side. And on the bottom right-hand photo, we have an image looking again towards the access. Again, difficult to make out roughly where the cursor is, but you can see the visibility is sort of improved or quite good due to the bend in the road. Another view from that point. The access is roughly here where the break in the two walls is. So the key matter to consider is vehicles leaving the proposed entry and exit to the site, and their visibility looking up the hill as vehicles or any potential vehicles are coming down it. We have a similar photo here, just the previous one. This is the access itself. I've included it just to make it clear. It's this part of the wall that will be removed to allow this access, or the proposed access, to be moved 2.5 meters towards towards our right as we're looking at it. This is the wall that limits visibility in the direction facing northwest. I've included this as well. This is the previous site plan that was considered back at the committee back in May. So as you can see, the access here is a lot closer to the wall here, so it has more of a restricted visibility. And at that point, that wall was retained. So it gives you an idea of the changes, and also shows the unmarked parking spaces here compared to the new proposal. We have a couple of plans here just comparing. Top left, we have what currently exists in terms of the access. So we have the access that currently serves Woodland Cottage. They have a parking space behind the house, and it's also number 57, or Umasaz, I believe it's also known. It's also believe the park sort of there wasn't a particular parking bay as such, but have been known to park in this area. So we have two properties using the access, as well as there's stables as well. In terms of any vehicles using the current access, which of course is particularly constrained in terms of what's there at the moment. And then bottom right, this shows the proposed access and how it relates to the existing. I've included this. This was a plan submitted by the applicant since the previous committee. It gives a bit of a comparison showing some of the existing accesses in the local area. Is primarily provided to give an indication that almost every single access in the nearby vicinity doesn't meet the guidance in terms of what a 30-mile-an-hour road would achieve in terms of visibility. So it just puts it in the context of, we're talking about an access in the context of other accesses in a high street, which is relatively narrow, and it has cars regularly parked up and down it. So cars have to be careful when going up and down it, because to be aware that there's always accesses on both sides. One thing I would want to draw your attention to in the update sheet is you'll see there's some comments in red. They came through only today. There were some late comments from the parish council that are summarised. What we've also done in terms of seeking clarification from the Highway Authority officer on the response, that's in the report itself, but also we did get an additional sentence from the Highways officer. It's pertinent in terms of the consideration of paragraph 109 of the NPPF. The Highways officer has confirmed that from the LHA's perspective, there isn't an unacceptable impact on highway safety, and the comments do not change our previous responses on this application. That's worth being aware of. So fundamentally, we're looking at a proposal that was deferred from the previous application to seek improved visibility from the previous application, or not previous application, previous layout. We have an amended layout. It has improved the visibility. It's also worth reiterating that in this case, the LHA officer has considered a 1 metre wide distance appropriate in this case in terms of looking north, in terms of what they consider would amount to an acceptable visibility and measure for allowing for cars to edge forward and look up the street. And ultimately the recommendation isn't changed since previous application, and the application is recommended for approval. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Patrick. Now we have 3 speakers. The first one is Mr. Paul Wren, who's an objector.
Hello.
Hello, Paul.
Hello.
Paul, can you hear us?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Get talking.
Oh, right, thank you. It is regrettable that ENC Planning failed to organise an on-site meeting with the Highway Authority, your own Councillor Hughes and the Parish Council. Until recently, I was a member of Twywell Parish Council. High Street public safety features regularly in Parish Council meetings. The High Street is congested with parked vehicles on a narrow road, especially as it approaches a blind bend on the southbound downhill part of the road, and there is poor visibility as a result of this, particularly in front of 57 High Street. Downhill vehicles and cyclists are often forced out onto the opposite side of the road, close to the blind bend, with very real danger of head-on collision. My own independent traffic survey reveals 400 vehicles travelling through the High Street daily at an average speed of 29 miles per hour, which confirms the danger aspect. I included these survey details in my objection letter of August 2019, but nobody from the NC Planning has asked to see it. However, I note that the planning officer has stated that travel speeds are likely to be low, which clearly is factually incorrect. Turning to the visibility display issues for vehicles entering and leaving the proposed development, the usual requirement of the 2-metre visibility display from the back of the highway boundary has been ignored by the planning officer, and a reduced display of 1 metre accepted instead. This fails to take account of the traffic flows and travel speeds that I just mentioned. The local highway authority has confirmed once more that the proposed access to the highway fails the minimum highway design standard required for this access, and that creeping out of the access is required to increase visibility to an acceptable level. Any driver exiting from the proposed access cannot follow Highway Code section 159 and move off only when it is safe to do so, because the local highway authority has stated the driver will not have sufficient visibility to confirm it is safe to move off until they have moved into the main road. In addition, vehicles regularly parking in front of 57 High Street are very close to the proposed development access and further worsen the visibility display issues, particularly regarding southbound, downhill, fast-moving traffic. This confirms the need for retention of a 2-metre visibility display requirement. Also, the planning officer states that there will be virtually no traffic increase based on current stable usage. This is absolutely factually incorrect, as only 2 vehicles have used this access point for the last 15 years, as no horses have been kept there. I know this because I have lived next door for 26 years. This was always a private stable for the previous owners of 57 High Street and has never been a commercial stable. A significant increase, 13 vehicles, will be using the access point under this planning proposal. Approving this application will place ENC citizens in danger of collision and injury. In conclusion, this planning application fails to provide adequate visibility display, and this unacceptably increases the danger of road traffic collision in the High Street. Please reject the planning application in accordance with National Planning Policy Framework Section 109. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Wren. Well timed. The second speaker is Mr. Jeff Screeton, who's speaking on behalf of Twywell Parish Council. Are you there, Jeff?
Good evening. Can you hear me? Hello?
We can hear you.
Hello, good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you, Chairman. Jeff Screeton, Twywell Parish Council. Thank you for inviting me. The parishioners and Parish Council still object to this application as safety remains a significant concern. Twywell Parish Council therefore has 3 objections. Number 1, the proposal states that cars exiting from the development should nose out to 1 metre into the road in order to spot incoming traffic. This is against the Highway Code, Manual for Streets and Northamptonshire's planning document DM9. Planning policy states, quote, that a development should only be prevented or refused on highway grounds if there would be an unacceptable impact on highway safety, unquote. The parish considers the access which does not allow users to drive in accordance with the basic highway code must have an unacceptable impact on highway safety, and hence our objection under planning policy. Objection 2. The applicant's measurements for the visibility splay are recorded incorrectly. All dimensions have been taken 1 metre into the carriageway, which is not in accordance with the manual for streets. The highway officer has accepted this deviation from the standard, but has failed to recognise the impact on road user safety. Correctly measuring the forward visibility splay without encroaching onto the highway is 2 metres by 15.4 metres, which is only appropriate for vehicles travelling at 13 miles per hour on High Street. High Street has a 30 miles per hour speed limit with an 85 percentile speed in the eastbound direction of 27 miles per hour, hence the lack of safety. Objection 3. The proposal for 3 additional houses has 11 car parking spaces and will generate circa 16 to 24 trips per day. The planning officer states that there will be virtually no traffic increase based on current stable usage. This is factually incorrect, as the stables have not been used for 15 years. Before that, it may have generated 1 or 2 trips per week as it was privately owned, used by the previous owners of 57 High Street and never used commercially. Hence, there will be a significant traffic increase on the substandard highway access. So in conclusion, the Parish Council recommends this application be refused due to an unacceptable impact on highway safety. That's us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Screeton.
Thank you.
The final... Sorry, say again. Never mind. And the third speaker is James Dale, who is a transport consultant on behalf of the applicant. Are you there, James?
Can you press star and 6 on your phone, please?
You hear me now?
Yeah, we can.
Okay.
Hello.
James, you're on.
Yeah, hello. Oh, okay. Thank you very much, Chair. Yes, I'll begin. My name is James Dale. I'm highway consultant commissioned by the applicant Bennett Homes to provide highway advice in relation to this planning application. I would like to take this opportunity to respond to one of the issues raised by the parish, which relates specifically to highway safety, in particular visibility and access, and explain why the proposed layout is considered to be safe. In this location, Northamptonshire highways rely on national design guidance. The companion guide to manual streets expands on the issues surrounding visibility at junctions. It states that it is often been assumed that failure to provide visibility at priority junctions in accordance with values recommended in Manual for Streets 1 will result in increased risk of injury collisions. Research carried out from Manual for Streets has found no evidence of this. The guidance continues to discuss junction visibilities and goes on to state that the wide distance, that's the visibility left and right, should be based on recommended standard stopping values. However, based on research referred to above, unless there is local evidence to the contrary, a reduction in visibility below recommended values will not necessarily lead to a significant problem. We have engaged with the local highway authority throughout the preparation of the application. It was acknowledged that visibility to the west may be substandard if normal dimensions are applied, but officers stated it was reasonable to give due weight to the fact that the revised access layout will be significant improvement over the existing access in terms of both gradient, materials and all visibility, noting that this proposal replaces an existing equestrian facility. In fact, it should also be noted that my client purchased the site as a result of positive pre-application advice from both highways and planning officers. The highway officers followed up on their pre-application assessment with their support for the initial layout and recently confirmed their support for improved design in their response to the application consultation. They stated that in this instance, the access junction visibility is sufficient as High Street is straight and visibility improves dramatically using the offset 1 metre rather than 2 metres, an exercise they confirmed to have carried out in practice. Similar to other quiet rural settings, The number of properties in the vicinity operate with safe, substandard visibility and supported by no record of collisions in the area. In summary, in line with recommendation of this planning committee, the access has been redesigned to maximise visibility. The local highway authority has confirmed their support for the layout, which significantly improves the existing access. National design guidance provides flexibility to support the design, which reflects a local street scene. Road safety is one of the main responsibilities of the local highway authority and a key consideration of their assessment. During this application, they've considered the proposal junction visibility on several occasions and confirmed it to be sufficient. Therefore, I commend this application to the committee for approval. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Excellent. Thank you, James. So that's the speakers for tonight. Now we go to the ward member, or the near ward member, which is Councillor Hughes.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm disappointed that if they're going to move the wall 1 metre, why don't they move it 2 metres and make everybody happy? Because to give a 1 metre splay doesn't really make that much difference. And it would have been nice if they'd actually consulted with the ward member, who's not me, but the other Councillor Hughes, Councillor Sylvia Hughes. Then she could have actually seen where they were measuring it, and whether they were measuring it in the middle of the road or whether they were measuring it actually on the drive was actually the case. I mean, I just feel that we're being pushed into making a decision about this when, for a little bit more effort, we could have actually resolved the issue and made everybody happy about it. Because there's only land, the land to the right of the drive is just a bit of land, it's a bit of field. It's not like we're taking somebody's garden, and I think it belongs to the applicant. So we could have made this a much better thing. In any case, if I'm not going to say what I'm going to come out at the moment, if the minding is to approve this, I would look at number 6 of your advisory notes of your conditions, and that is that any changes to this drive should be done before the development, not before the occupants of the houses. In other words, they must change this before they start driving lorries in there and all the rest of it. But I'm not happy about the fact that with a little bit more effort, they could have made it much happier and made much better for everybody. And now to ask us to approve it, I know it's twice it's been here, but it seems they pushed us to this where we could have actually made a much better solution.
Okay, thank you, Dudley. So let's move round the table and let's see if other members have a comment or don't want to comment, please. So, Councillor Barbara Jenny.
I don't have any comments to add, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Jones.
No comments to add.
Councillor Andy Mercer.
No comments, Chairman.
Councillor Jill Mercer.
No comments, Chairman.
Councillor Pentland.
I have nothing substantive to add.
Councillor Shacklock.
Nothing to comment on, thank you.
Councillor Smith.
No further comments, Chair.
Councillor Thomas.
No comments, Mr. Chairman.
Councillor Underwood. Robin.
Yeah, no comments, Chairman.
And Councillor Lee Wilkes.
Chairman, just one really quick question. Listening to the comments by the parish council, they mentioned that Highways had compared the amount of traffic coming in and out of this site with the comparing it to the existing whatever it is. Can we just confirm, is that true? Are Highways assuming that it is currently working as a stables?
If I can answer that, Chair. No, that was I was a bit confused by that. It's been considered as serving 2 dwellings, and the proposal is for 3, so we'd have 5 dwellings served. I haven't got the report in front of me, but I don't ever recall considering any equestrian or stable relating traffic. The proposal has always been considered on the basis purely of residential. I wouldn't put any. I don't think any serious weight or possibly any weight at all has been considered on any other form of traffic. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Hughes, is back to you for a proposal.
Yes, well, two things I'd like to say. First of all, if my colleagues decide, I'm going to vote to refuse this again because I think they've not got it right. They've said that the road's straight. It isn't straight. There's a big bend just before this entrance, and I'm not happy that they haven't gone the full thing. Made the display nice and wide. They could have easily done so. They've got the land. It wouldn't have made that much difference to them, and then it would have been much better. And if comparing the 11 houses up there, plus the one that's 57, they're going to have vehicles there. The odd 20-odd vehicles coming out every day, compared to one tractor with a horse trailer behind, is just not comparing like with like. If by any chance that my colleagues don't agree with me, I would like on condition 6, where it says prior to the first occupation of any dwelling, that should be prior to the commencement of development. So in other words, they alter the display before they start building, not after they've built all the houses.
Understand. Before we move on, Dudley, can we have a comment from Patrick, please?
Yes.
Yes. I guess in terms of what's been put before us today since the 20th, the change has been confirmed both by the applicant and ourselves that the visibility has been improved as far as possible. It's been moved to that southeast. The visibility to the southeast has always been acceptable. It's been up the lane where it's been reduced from the guidelines. So there is no other practical way of improving the visibility. It's been moved as far as practical can be to improve it. And there was mention of a 1 metre wall. The 1 metre wasn't in reference to a wall. The wall on that side is going. The 1 metre is the Y distance in terms of where the measurement from the edge of the carriageway is taken. So I don't think I have anything else to add at that point. Thank you.
The wall is going to as we look at the drive, the wall is going to the right or to the left?
To the right.
So that is a piece of ground where it could if the wall is going, the display could be made wider because that's just dead ground. It's only a bit of field.
That's the side. Sorry.
Why is that move 1 metre and not move 2 metres, which would make everybody happy?
It's going 2.5 metres. The access is moving 2.5 metres in that direction.
So we're going to get an access that's 2.5 metres wider.
No, the access itself isn't any wider. It's moved. The whole thing is moved along, as it were.
Why don't we just leave the access where it is, and then just add the extra 2 metres, and then everybody will be happy? Why move the whole thing if you've got an access already there on the left-hand side? Great, leave that there. Why don't we just move the wall on the right-hand side, make it wider by 2 metres? The world is well, everybody will be happy then.
Can I just comment and say that you need to determine the application that's before
well, then
you
I'm saying
tonight.
On the grounds that with a little bit more care, it could have been the other thing I can do is defer it, whether you go back to the agent and ask whether he's prepared to do that, which would the officer advise me to do?
I would say that simply having a wider access doesn't improve visibility. It's not. That's the matter here is visibility. So moving the access as shown makes the visibility the best possible from the site. Simply making it extra wide in terms of the actual surface, that's not improving the visibility. It's the point of where the vehicles enter and exit. So what we have is and that's confirmed by the Highway Authority as well.
So I'm sorry to ask these questions, and I know everybody wants to go home, but there we go. The access on the left-hand side is going to be actually taken down. They're going to build another wall there, are they? Because there's a wall on the left-hand side and the wall on the right-hand side. You're taking the wall out on the right-hand side, making it wider. So you're going to move the wall on the left-hand side to make it narrower. Doesn't make sense to me. Is that right?
If I can answer, the wall on the left-hand side, as if we're on the street looking at it, that
Yes.
remains unaffected.
That remains unaffected. So the wall on the right-hand side is moving 2 metres. 2 metres?
Well, it goes to allow the access to be moved 2.5 metres in that direction.
So the axis is going to be 2.5 meters wide.
No, the axis itself isn't going to be 2.5 meters.
Sorry to be so difficult about this, but
the
I think
position
it's
is
all
moved.
clear, and if it had been clear, we wouldn't be having this discussion. If they're moving a wall 2 meters, are they making it wider 2 meters?
Councillor Hughes, can I just butt in, sorry, and just say that it actually sets out at paragraph 2.2 what the changes are to the application?
I know I've read it and I'm not at all clear, as it seems to me my friend here isn't all that clear.
Yes, I agree. This is a difficult one for us to make a judgment, isn't it, members? Because we can't see clearly one side or the other.
If the ward member had a chance to go out there and have a look, then of course we know what we're talking about. The ward member wasn't invited to go out and have a look. So
you've got the opportunity to defer this, perhaps, in the view of this area being cleaned up to the officers and the ward members. Okay. Or
I think that would be the best solution. Because I'm loath to actually propose to refuse it, because it seems to me, you know, they've gone to a lot of trouble and all the rest of it, but it doesn't seem at all clear from reading the paperwork or from seeing the plan. If they do perhaps a photograph with just the bit sliced off, but if the wall is moving 2 meters to the right,
defer this so that we can get more explanations to it.
Right, let's have a defer in order to get more explanation, and everybody can have a proper see. Perhaps the ward member could be invited to go out and have a look, and see if it's satisfactory, and then we can bring it back and we'd be happy to push it forward.
With respect, we have clear plans in front of us. And we've already deferred this once.
I know.
There's no need for a deferral. The plans are quite clear. Not only have we got an amended site plan, we've got additional plans showing the nature of the access and where it's to be. If a member, I mean, I'm happy to bring the presentation and bring that back up so you can have a look at it, or the plans are on the website. But simply because a member hasn't understood the plans is not a reason for a deferral. And given this is the second deferral, there is a very good chance that this would be appealed, and that would be unreasonable.
Well, I'm not misunderstanding. I'm asking you, as if you've prepared the plan, straightforward question: is the actual now entrance going to be 2 meters wider? If it is, that's okay. And
no, it's not going to be 2 meters wider. It's moved 2.5 meters to the southeast.
So if it's moved, so how can it have moved if they don't move the left-hand wall?
Because it moves to the right-hand side. That's where the wall is on the right.
The right-hand side, it's been moved to add a wider display to the axis. Is that right?
That's right. Yes.
That's right. Well, I'm going to go with it because I think we probably talked about this long enough and everybody wants to go home. But I'm still, I trust that this is really going to make this entrance much wider for the sake of the people who are going to use it. I mean, to say that one tractor came out first and now the 15 cars are going to go in and out is not really, I think it's just the sort of information that we don't need really. And so I'm not very happy about it, but I take your point that if we defer it again, they may get very unhappy, and I don't want to cause all that grief. So we'll change the condition 6, please, to saying prior to the commencement of development rather than prior to the first occupation. So at least the lorries will go in the wider entrance. And the other thing was, correct me if I'm wrong, but I didn't see hours of work, which are normally included in these things, when they can only work between the normal hours. Is that included? I didn't spot that in the application. Maybe it was in the original one, but normally we have hours of work only between 8 and 5, don't we? Is that correct?
I can't see it listed, but it could be added.
Because that, I mean, that isn't in the application. So am I correct? If I'm correct, if I'm mistaken, that's fair enough. But it should be in the application. They can work between 8 and 5.
Condition number 12 has got the hours for construction work in it.
Number 12. This number 12 is about planting and seeding, the one I've got. Right, if it's in there, it's in there. I'll take your word for it.
I can see it on condition 13.
Apologies, yeah, I gave the wrong number.
Oh, right, that's why I didn't spot it. Right, okay, doke. Let's go for acceptance then, and we'll take this take this entrance has now been much improved, and we're going to change condition 6.
So a proposal, please.
Yeah, propose to accept.
And a seconder for that,
Happy to second that with those condition changes.
Councillor Wilkes. So that's proposed and accepted. And for the last time tonight, let's do a round robin for accepting or refusing. So, Councillor Jackson.
Not been here all night,
Oh,
Chair.
you've crossed him out twice. Councillor Jenny.
For the proposal.
Councillor Jones.
For the proposal.
Councillor Andy Mercer.
For the proposal, Chairman.
Councillor Jill Mercer.
For.
Councillor Pentland.
For the proposal.
Councillor Shacklock.
For.
Councillor Alex Smith.
For the proposal, Chair.
Councillor Peter Thomas.
For the proposal.
Councillor Robin Underwood.
For the proposal, Chairman.
And Councillor Lee Wilkes.
Yeah, for it, I seconded it.
Charlie, what's the scores?
11 unanimous for the motion to grant the application, Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you for giving me the time, Chairman, to try and explore this as fully as possible, because you realise it's a sensitive issue, and I hope that it's going to be successful. The people of Twywell are going to be happy with it.
Indeed, thank you. And thank you for the debate tonight, gentlemen and ladies. We've, I think, done a fairly good job of what we've had. OK, it's taken some time, but Councillor Jill Mercer and I are looking at ways to improve our virtual systems from our point of view. And we'll get back to you guys when we've got some more information we're talking about. So I wish you all a good night. Thank you for maintaining the hours that we have, and we'll see you again next time round. Good night.
Thank you, Chair. Good night, all.
Good night.
Alex,
Yeah.
could you just text me your email address,
Hi,
please,
Lee.
or email me your private address?
Yeah, I'll do that.
Thank you.